We're just going to wait until 1 minute past 10 just to give everybody time to make sure they're set up and they can hear and see everything. So just give us a short amount of time and we'll be kicking off shortly. Okay, everybody, the numbers are creeping up, so people are slowly joining us, but we'll get started so that we stick to time today. Welcome, everybody, to this very exciting morning of amazing insight into the PR world and, of course, for the PRCA's Career Development Day. My name is Jason. I work at PRWeek, and I am here to moderate the morning's session, and obviously would love to have seen all of you, but unfortunately I can only see numbers right now. So the thing I would say at the very beginning is I'd love to hear from you today. We have got the facility for you to actually participate throughout the morning with whatever sessions you're joining us on, with any questions that you have for the amazing list of people that we've got to speak to you today. Before we get started, it's important to mention that we are recording this session for you, and you'll be sent the recording afterwards to view at your own pleasure. Please do get involved. I mean, obviously, this is obviously for you. It's a great list of people lined up to give you some amazing sorts of insight into the world of PR. And of course, you know, that's going to be really important for you to get involved with. And of course, obviously, with you asking questions, you make the asking questions for yourself. But of course, those questions are important for other people to hear the answers to as well. So don't be shy. Please feel free to get involved. And we'd love to hear any questions you might have for people that are speaking to you today. That will be on the questions section just below on the screen in front of you. First of all, wanted to also thank our headline sponsors. That will be PRWeek. Thank you, PRCA. You're very welcome. Thank you for having us. And then, of course, we also have Liquid and Rueben Sinclair. So amazing sponsors, if I should say so myself. And of course, these guys are also going to have involvement in speaking to you today about the content that they have. So very exciting stuff. And if you do enjoy today's conference, please also share on social using the hashtag PRCA Careers, hashtag on Twitter. You can also find the PRCA at PRCA_UK. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to the first person that's going to speak to you today, a person that probably doesn't need very much introduction, but I'm going to introduce you Francis Ingham, who is the director of the PRCA, and Francis is going to give you a little welcome into today's session. So without further ado, Francis, over to you.
Thank you, Jason. And thanks everyone for being here. To repeat those comments Jason just made, PRWeek Jobs, thanks very much indeed for being our headline sponsor. It's the best source of info on jobs in the industry by far. And thank you to Liquid. They're a fantastic, brilliant agency, really are. And Rueben Sinclair, our talent partner for quite a long time now, and a brilliant source of help in this market. Just a few words, and then I'll hand back to Jason. First of all, about the state of the market. Well, obviously, it's been a brutal 12 months or so. Half of the employers I spoke with made redundancies. Plenty of people lost their jobs. Really sad, obviously, for all of them, and terrible time for many, many people. But the industry survived, and survived in much better shape than it might have done, actually. And I'd say about half of the employers I speak with at the moment are recruiting again at every level. So there are once more plenty of jobs out there. There's a very definite recovery going on in the PR market, and if this terrible period of stress and challenge has proved one thing, it's proved the value of effective communications. And I'm really confident that we are getting back on track. Offices are opening up again, people are recruiting, we're getting back to some semblance of normality. Second comment, as you look for jobs, I'd encourage you to do this, to read about the industry. Employers really want candidates who know what's going on. And it's really easy to know what's going on. Just read PRWeek, fantastic source of information, and the PRCA. Our reports are all free, all in the public domain. Our digital report of a few weeks ago, our annual census on the makeup of the market, our gender pay gap reporting, our diversity and inclusion guidelines, loads of stuff out there that can make you really aware of what's going on. Also, grab any work experience you can. Employers really value it, and it is beginning again, sometimes in a remote form, sometimes in a physical one. And there'll be more of that as the year goes on. And this as well, be prepared to ask big people for small favors, whether it's a phone call or in due course a coffee, just to talk about how they see the world of PR and how they might be able to help you, because you'd be surprised at how frequently they will say yes to that request. And if you're at one of our partner universities, remember you are automatically members of the PRCA. You get to go to all of our group events for free. There were 200 of them last year on a whole range of things, and you get all of our online training for free. So give yourself an advantage over people and make use of all those resources. Finally, it's a lot better place it was than this time last year. Things are recovering. There are plenty of jobs out there. So best of luck with your careers. And remember, the PRCA will always be here to support you. Enjoy the day. Back to you, Jason.
Thank you very much, Francis. An amazing summary. And yes, obviously, we've highlighted a lot of things that we've been hearing, quite a bit of, which is, it's been an incredibly turbulent time, a difficult time. But certainly from PRWeek Jobs' perspective, we're on the up in terms of, what we're seeing in the markets, what we're seeing in the industry. It's incredibly encouraging to see. And of course, I'm sure more insight will be shared on that, and also what people have been up to, as well as tips, tricks, and lots of different advice for everybody that's listening today. So thank you, Francis, for that insight, and it's good to hear from you. And we'll move on to our first speakers of the day, which is exciting. So I have the pleasure of introducing to you two lovely ladies, Saskia and Ishtar, both from Edelman, UK. Good morning to you both. Saskia and Ishtar are going to be peeling back the curtain on life in the communications industry. So they're going to give a lot of insight into how you put your best foot forward first. And I think that's quite important when you're thinking about starting a career in PR, and also giving a taste of what it's like to work in a larger communications agency, because I think, especially with a global footprint, I think that insight will be incredibly valuable to people who want to learn more. And also they'll show recent examples of integrated storytelling that have earned attention and built trust for them as a business and for the clients that they work with and for. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce these two ladies to you. Ishtar and Saskia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jason. And hi, everyone. We're really excited to be here. We love doing this kind of thing. And, just talking about life in PR, and also, of course, life at Edelman. So we're just going to do a quick intro. So I am Ishtar Schneider. I am an associate director in our healthcare team, so one of our health sector teams. I have been in the industry for just under 10 years. I spent 6 years working in Australia. I'm obviously from the US originally, and I've been in London working in the UK Edelman office for almost 3 years.
And I'm Saskia. I'm an account manager within the brand team at Edelman. I've been there for 3.5 years now. Started out fresh as an intern from university, and as Francis actually just mentioned, sometimes it's about asking big people for small advice and help. I'm really happy to chat through in the questions how I got here. I work on Starbucks mainly, from the product team to the public affairs team. So a lot of promotion of products, but also very much reactive and protecting the brand. Without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, so hopefully everyone is going to be able to see these slides.
Fingers crossed that you can see those So, just a little bit about Edelman in general. If you haven't heard of us, we are the largest independent PR agency in the world. And that does mean that we have a lot of people in a lot of places, which is really exciting. So, we have offices in 65 different places around the world. So from Australia, we've got Sydney and Melbourne, through the US, across the US, across EMEA. We have a really large presence in Asia Pacific. And it's really cool because even though we are a family-owned business, it was the Edelman family who started it and continue to run it today. And so, you will have probably seen Richard speaking on, kind of topics all around the world that are impacting our industry. But, it really does feel like a family, and we are interconnected. So I think a lot of the time when you have a really big organization, it can feel really big and you might think that you would get lost in the shuffle, but we are a truly globally connected agency. And I think, to be honest, the fact that with the pandemic, everything has been completely shifted to online, that has actually just helped us be in more direct contact with our colleagues in different places. So, some of the work that I work on is really talking to people in our France office, in our Asia Pacific offices, so across Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. I work, one of my teams is split in DC. So it really is quite a fun and dynamic environment to be working in. Speaking of PR Week, we do love it. We were awarded the PR Week Agency of the Decade for the 2010 to 2020. And we are the agency of record for quite a few large global clients. So people like Mars. So I personally work on Mars Pet Care, which is really fun, and talking all about the health benefits of having a pet and what that means. From companies like PayPal, eBay, Kellogg's, HP, Heineken, Lego, HSBC, and Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca. So, for health in particular, which is what I work on, there has never been a better time to be working in comms, right? It is, with a global pandemic, it's been a bit crazy, and, things are changing day by day, but that has meant really amazing opportunities to learn and grow and work on stuff that, is really shaping the world as we know it. So that's just a little flavor of what we work on, and we're kind of going to dive into some of that as we get in here. So for us, working in PR is really around building trust. This is really our what sets us apart. So Edelman has been looking at how we can build trust for brands and businesses for over 21 years. So if I know this is a video, Saskia, so we might just quickly play this and then I can go into the next slide.
Absolutely.
Chinese restaurants, they're closing at double the rate of others.
As if we needed to hear any more up stats right now.
Take out hate. Take out hate.
That Taco Bell is opening a hotel and resort.
Welcome to The Bell, a Taco Bell hotel and resort where Taco Bell dreams turn into reality.
We turned a KFC proposal into South Africa's biggest brand moment of the decade.
Just the timing, I'm going to stop there, and we can come back to it if we have time to play the rest.
So yes, so as you can see some of the examples there, we are really focused on building relationships with not, our external and internal audiences. So, from whether those are healthcare professionals, whether those are consumers and pet owners, whether those are people who will buy your products and services, whoever those are, policymakers. It's really about creating those really strong relationships and partnerships for the future. The trust barometer that I mentioned is something that we've been running for 21 years. So this is just a snapshot of how trust, kind of rise and fall of trust has changed over that time. And if you've seen anything about this recently, or if you haven't, I would encourage you to take a look. But really, what we're seeing now is the rise of something that we're calling information bankruptcy, which really means that people's trust in all four institutions across government and business has really plummeted, and this is causing a crisis in trust. And but it really is opening up an opportunity for businesses, especially leaders of businesses like CEOs, to step up and take a lead. And there's a lot in the trust barometer that I won't unpack right now, but every year reveals something else and another opportunity for us to pivot in how we're communicating to our key audiences.
So you might be wondering what actually is PR. I'm sure a lot of you do know it, but as for myself, before I started off in it, I saw it as very much a sort of glitz and glam of Samantha in Sex and the City, or the drama of Call My Agent. But it's obviously a lot more than attending sparkly events, and it's certainly more than press releases. PR is all about reputation. So being able to keep the reputation of a brand, a company, an individual. It's about managing the spread of the information between that brand or company and the public. And it's a combination of what the brand does, what they say, and also what others are saying about that brand, which in turn can really impact choices and motivate action, whether it's positive or negative. And I guess I like to describe our roles a bit as brand guardians within public relations. We promote brands, but we also have to protect them to the best of our ability. And so what do we do? Well, at Edelman, we have a really wide variety of teams within the business. As Ishtar mentioned, it spans the globe, but even just within the UK team in London, we have a whole range of different specialists in their field, whether it's media experts who have their finger on the pulse of the press and what's going on in the media landscape, or social gurus who are keeping one step ahead of the latest TikTok trends. I can't involve myself in that one. Bit of a granny on social media. But then, likewise, there's other bits of the business where it's, crisis communications, when you have to manage and control a negative situation that is picking up pace. And sometimes you have to really switch, be dynamic, shifting from one to the other. But we have this fantastic array of people within the business, and they each are able to advise on their parts of the work.
So you would have seen in the video we touch on earned, and so we really wanted to look at kind of the different pieces of the puzzle as we think about them. So we talk about this as something like 360-degree storytelling, and what it all what these pieces all have in common is the story that we're trying to tell. So regardless of what client you're working on, or what piece of business, or what challenge you're trying to solve, what all these people and all the different teams have in common is that we are all really great storytellers, and we love a good story. And so, and what we're focused on is unpacking what people care about within that story. So, whether it's media, what is going to get them interested, or your key stakeholders, or like I said, policymakers. It's what is it about your story that intersects with their interests, and is really going to have the cut through that you're looking for. So we're looking at earned, traditional earned media, so newspapers, radio, TV, owned media channels, which has had a meteoric rise. So looking at how you can craft your own narrative, and we are all our own publishers these days. And also paid paid opportunities and paid partnerships, which really has come to rise on social channels as well, which is really an opportunity for you to maximize the amount of people who are seeing your messages. And this is something that we have already touched on, but for us it's really being able to get people to care about what you have to say is a privilege, and it really does come down to how you package that up. People aren't going to care unless you give them a reason to care, and so you have to earn that. You have to earn that reputation, earn that trust, and it really is about bringing evidence to the table. Having a really powerful, impactful story that's built on on values that people care about and have to share with you or your client and your business. And so this for us sits at the core of everything that we're trying to do day to day.
So taking a bit of a wider look at the news at the moment, the media landscape is continually fragmenting, continually shifting. Gone are the days of people just picking up a newspaper and that's where they get their news. We now are consuming news and content in totally new and different ways. There's also lots of different voices, whether it's influencers on social media, whether it's our employers, whether it's peers, whether it's friends. So there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of chatter, and there's a lot of new channels, on mobile, on-demand services, which is sort of diminishing the role of traditional media. And those traditional media titles are responding by becoming omni-channel too. So, they're having their own social channels and really building on content creators and partnering with other influential voices to share their news. News is also 24 hours. It's not just, we're going to listen to the news at 8 a.m. in the morning. It's going on constantly. And just because we're in the UK, it doesn't mean we won't hear news from Japan or from the US in real time. We're also, as Ishar just mentioned, we're all our own journalists in a way. We're all sharing news. People take to social media to share updates on stories or, things going on. And that often gets picked up by the media themselves. And then, consumers' consumption habits are changing. The stuff that we're buying, the way we buy it, the volume of choice is mad. There's a huge amount. So we're always expecting speed, convenience, and instant gratification and a really easy experience at the base of it. So the drivers of that purchase behavior are changing too. And then public relations can really play a part in interrupting the consideration of the consumer's journey and their path to purchase.
And as we mentioned, that we are kind of at a point, at a crisis of trust, and really, but the way that we like to think about this is an opportunity for communications professionals, regardless of what sector you're in, and if we go into the next slide, we're looking at a world where, people are not seeing content in terms of native advertising anymore without paid spend. And so, to be able to have this cut through, marketers are moving their budgets away from traditional advertising spend where, it's a lot of money for not a lot of return, and the measurable impact is really difficult, and moving towards more communications and PR based skill sets. So I think, it goes back to what Francis said earlier, which is, a lot of agencies are hiring because our business is booming, and people are recognizing the importance of communication skills and communication needs, and being able to communicate effectively with our target audiences, and impacting their, how they think about brands and encouraging them to do and take action.
And as Ishra mentioned, it's even more important than ever at the moment to achieve cut through with these stories. So they need to be news driving moments, fame making moments, and it's about finding the right storytelling that people are going to really care about, and they, it's sort of in sync with their values. To stop them scrolling and just keep scrolling. Actually, they're going to stop and they're going to engage and they want to get involved. And all the noise that we've just seen in the last couple of slides makes it very hard, but it's a great challenge to have. So I'm going to take you into a day in the life, which is a rather difficult one, because I'm sure a lot of people in the industry would have the same response, is that no 2 days are the same in communications. That's particularly true of Edelman. There's a lot of the day-to-day due diligence. So, researching social trends, finding the right journalists or influencers for certain campaign, brainstorming, monitoring and reporting, oh, glamour of reporting, but it's obviously incredibly important. And then once you've got, the foundation, there's strategy, there's planning, which leads to sort of content creation, drafting the press releases, planning events, briefing in spokespeople. And it goes all the way up to having a proactive campaign or piece of work or event, and that likewise is ever changing. No matter how well planned a campaign or a strategy is, one minute you'll proactively be pitching a story to journalists, and the next minute a huge protest will start in Washington DC, or someone in the royal family will pass away, and it means you suddenly have to take a step back. You've got to be dynamic, shift your strategy, take time in your thinking and come up with a new plan of action. So I think, a day in the life is certainly never boring. That's something I can absolutely say for sure. There's a lot going on, and it's constantly shifting. And I'm just going to play you a quick video. This is me living my best life at the Edelman Christmas party a couple of years ago. But just so you can see, Edelman's not just about work. We have a fantastic, style of life and a fantastic family, as Tom mentioned earlier. So this is another video. We're not going to play this just in the interest of time, but really what we wanted to make a point here was that, for us, it's also really important that we live our values. And one of those values is around the positively impacting society. And for us at Edelman, that really means having time dedicated for your day job to citizenship efforts, as well as, for me, it's a passion point. I help lead our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts within the UK office, and connected into our EMEA kind of offering. And so, it really is about encouraging people to think of comms as a career path, but also, making it as open to people from diverse backgrounds as possible. So this video, which we can share with you later, is about our Edelman Open program. And that is a program where we don't look at traditional CVs. We encourage people to apply by answering creative thinking questions. And so, for example, we have a guy in my team who was actually a police officer, and he is now, a comms professional. But it's really about how you think, how you problem solve, are you a great writer? But you don't necessarily have to have what we would consider a traditional comms background to be able to be good in PR. And more and more as the skill set diversifies, I think that will remain true. And so I would just say, as you're considering your career in PR, is really looking for a place that values that diversity, that has that kind of diversity of thinking and teams. And so for us, that is definitely something that underscores everything that we do.
So we just have a couple of examples to take you through, and I'll whiz through these because I know we're kind of running short on time. But this one is just one I wanted to share from our Mars Pet Care client, which was really around tackling the loneliness epidemic. And this was actually something that feels really, really relevant today, but was actually something that we started in 2019, which was around the impact that pets could have on loneliness and social isolation. And we actually did a piece of research to look at what that could be, and we found that pets are a viable part of the solution in terms of the science that shows that having a pet around can provide this companionship and can actually help alleviate some of the health effects of loneliness, which has been shown to be as detrimental as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, which I always, still kind of boggles my mind. And really what we did was convene the first ever summit on social isolation and companion animals to engage healthcare decision makers in this conversation and really put the idea of human and animal interaction as a part of the solution on the table. And this has been, kind of a 3-year campaign ongoing. We did a piece of research to look at that and have amplified that. We did a white paper about what needs to happen in terms of conducting additional scientific research to look at, who and in what instances this might be appropriate. And of course, we did, widespread media outreach that, was targeting pet owners, policymakers, and stakeholders that were looking at this type of research and what it means. And so, we had the Vivek Murthy, who was the previous Surgeon General for the U.S., as one of our keynote speakers, and you'll see in the photo he's there talking to Pamela Mars from the Mars family, who is the kind of the pet care ambassador, about what this really means and the potential of this as a solution. So really fun one to do, and it kind of gives you a flavor of some of the things that we do.
Again, I'm going to spin through our final, I'm just going to skip this video. Sorry, we're going to try and play. Oh. Here we go. I'm going to skip through this very quickly, conscious of time. This is totally hot off the press. It's a campaign that we're working on this past week. So it's very current, but in essence, Starbucks were launching a new Frappuccino, the Bold-tastic Frappuccino. I'm hoping a lot of you will have seen this on social media and across the news. But the challenge here was that Starbucks is constantly creating these bold, innovative beverages, and keeping ahead of evolving tastes and preferences of their customers. But it was, how do we make this different? How do we really spark joy? How do we engage that Gen Z target audience for them? And we, conducted lots of brand tracking, regular media audits, looking to see what people were covering, what is that audience engaging with, and we're seeing a huge amount of engagement with the cultural phenomenon that is RuPaul's Drag Race, especially the UK seasons over here. And we knew this was of interest culturally and felt there's a real synergy with Starbucks' new fun, colourful drink. So who better to engage than Blue Hydrangea, the Blue Look Queen for season 1. She's regularly creating bold, colourful makeup transformation videos on her social channels. She has a high following, they're really engaged, they love this fun kind of content. And so we crafted this integrated campaign working with her to craft some really fun, colourful content for her social channels, but it then allowed for numerous different storytelling opportunities. It wasn't just us working with an influencer. We could then use that video content, share it with pop culture titles. For example, the cultural trend titles like Pop Sugar, we've got Delish, we've got the foodie titles, and then the wider news titles. This was, with the wider news titles, it was more down the line product story, which was really focused on the innovation and the wacky fun, popping candy on the whipped cream, all sorts in that drink. It's fantastic. We then also had a real supportive network of earned influencers, and they were sort of color coordinating their outfits and their makeup to the drink, which then carried on the conversation organically on social media. And like I mentioned before, there's always curveballs. Sadly, Prince Philip passing away on Friday, it also meant that we had to stop pitching. We literally started pitching 2 hours before the news. We had to suddenly change tack. We were very, we wanted to remain respectful, and we totally changed our tack there and held off, continued to contact journalists. while the news was being covered over the weekend. And once the sort of news was starting to subside, more positive stories were coming out about other products. We felt, this is the right moment to continue letting people know that this drink is around for this week. So that is that one. I won't play the video, but do go and check out Blue Hydrangea's social post. It's a really fun one. You can see the final look here. It's going to play anyway. But on to questions. Please do shout. I'm sorry we've overrun slightly.
No, don't worry. But thank you to both of you. I found that incredibly insightful. I hope that the rest of the people listening in also did. I personally took away from the fact that brand guardianship and trust, what pivotal messages that they have and how important they are within the PR and comm space. And, I think that that's something that's actually very difficult to uphold and difficult to continue on and build on. So congratulations to you and Edelman for continuing that message of importance. And I think, just to do a couple of questions, we've got about 4 minutes to do these. So we'll do a couple of key ones. I hope that's okay. And I'll open it to both of you so that maybe either one of you can answer. But I think the first question is, the other thing for me personally, from PRWeek Jobs' perspective, I definitely picked up about the creative thinking questions in your recruitment process. I think that's awesome. Removes sort of the bias that can come within the recruitment process. That's a massive conversation. We won't go into that now because that will be all day long. But that one of the questions we have was that what does Edelman prefer? Especially with a global business. If you have applicants that don't have international experience, especially people who are starting off in their careers in the early stages. Does that have an effect? Does that have an impact? Do you think when you do start to work with international clients? Whether that's language barriers or whether that's differences in culture, and does that have a part to play? Do you find that that's something that can affect things ultimately?
I'm happy to take this one first. I think for us, this is something that we're seeing, not just because we want diverse teams, but because the work that we work on is so diverse and global, especially in the UK. We work on a lot of global business that has kind of ties into different markets, and so the clients themselves are demanding diverse teams and diverse ways of thinking, and so that's where you kind of get the best ideas. For us, great ideas can come from anywhere, and so we're less focused, especially at entry levels, on people knowing it all. We definitely don't expect that, and it could kind of be surprising if you did. To be honest, like I still don't know it all, and Saskia definitely did. We just don't know it all either, and I think we are looking for people who have a great attitude, who can think creatively, who can be problem solvers. And so for me, I would always, when I'm looking at, doing interviews and speaking to people, I'm looking for people who have a side hustle they're super passionate about. And, and how does that influence like what they do day to day? Are you a really amazing musician? And so you bring that kind of musical thinking into how you tell your stories. Like what makes you different? And, how do you bring that to the table? And so I would say, we don't expect you to have the answers, but we want you to be prepared and have a great attitude. And I would always rather take someone who has less experience, but is hungry for it. And, just wants to roll up their sleeves and help us get it done. So, from my perspective, that's definitely what we're looking for.
Amazing stuff. Yeah, that's brilliant. It's nice and encouraging to hear as well. I think, and also we have to be mindful of this, and we have to take steps in improving this as time goes on and doing things in the right way and giving people opportunities, and that's really critical. I think the final question is, ladies, just before we wrap up, and this does have to be very quick. What would you say is the most effective way for early PRers, anybody that's starting early in their career, to get involved, to be proactive? And I think you've almost touched on it with extracurricular and other side hustles, as I love that. What is the best way to encourage that to people to get involved?
I'm happy to start this one. I think just being able to show your passion and enthusiasm. I know those words are thrown around a lot, but as Ishtar said, someone who's just really willing to work hard and is really passionate about certain pointers, whether that is like an extracurricular piece or whether that's just like really just wanting to get into the thick of it and starting. I think everyone starts in the industry in different ways. Mine was quite unorthodox. It's very interesting hearing Francis at the beginning. I doing a lot of research, getting rejected by a lot of agencies, lots of cover letter CVs, but I decided to take a bit of a different tact. And, doing the due diligence on Edelman, I spotted that our chairman, totally randomly, was also the chancellor of my uni that I'd literally just heard, my graduation speech a couple of weeks before. So decided to handwrite a letter to him, because I just thought that's how I feel I can stand out. It's like, let's write on some really colourful paper, hence my colourful room, and see if he has 5 minutes to give me some top tips on working in the industry. And he very kindly passed that on, and I started with an internship, and it built on from there. But I think being passionate, being trying to get your foot in the door, it's very hard, but it's certainly possible if if you're willing to give it a go.
Amazing. Yeah, brilliant. I love that. And also a bit of personal insight from you and how you started as well. And I think that's really important. But obviously, ladies, we'll have to leave it there. Ishtar, Saskia, it's been wonderful to hear from you both, Ishtar and Saskia from Edelman UK. If you do have any other questions or anything that you want to find out more about Edelman, do research them. But thank you for joining us today. And thank you for taking the time to go through everything. And we're going to move on now. So thanks very much. And feel free to stay on if you want to. We're going to move on now to ultimately talking now about from the PR rising stars, people in the industry who have had real success and have got some additional insight into their successes in the industry. I'm now going to introduce Lisa Wood, who's a Northwest manager for PRCA. Welcome, Lisa. Sorry, it's slightly run over a little bit, but lovely to have you. And I'm going to hand over straight to you without further ado to introduce our panelists.
Good morning, Jason. Hi, everybody. Really excited to chair this panel today of our rising stars. So yeah, we have a really great lineup of our panel. I'll actually hand over to them in a second for them to also sort of introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. But yeah, I'm the Northwest manager for the PRCA here, and I also sort of work in PR as well, but just having a little bit of a break at the moment because I've got a little babber. So I just wanted to say a couple of little quotes about being a star. To be a star, you must shine your own light, follow your own path, and don't worry about the darkness, for that is when stars shine the brightest. And Marilyn Monroe also said, everyone is a star and deserves the right to twinkle. So let's hand over to our PR stars. First of all, I'm going to hand over to Jason. So Jason, would you like to introduce yourselves, tell us quickly where you work, and a little bit about your background, very quickly.
Hi, yeah, thanks very much for having me. Really glad to be here. Can you hear me okay? Am I coming through?
Yeah, excellent, no problem.
Brilliant, yeah. So my name is Jason Ashford. I am here in sunny Belfast. I am a corporate communications advisor for the Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service. So I'm in-house. My role covers a sort of wide range of stuff from media relations to public affairs to internal communications. I joined the Fire and Rescue Service about 1.5 years ago, having previously worked in a PR and public affairs firm in Belfast. And before that, I worked for a member of the Legislative Assembly here in Northern Ireland.
Interesting job, thank you. And I'll go over to Helen next. Helen, can you just introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, great, thank you.
Perfect, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Hélène Leguet. I'm a senior consultant at APCO Worldwide, which is a strategic communications firm based in London, but headquartered in Washington, DC. And I've been with APCO for about 3 years now. I'm originally from France, and I've been in the UK for almost 5 years now. So at APCO, I work for Global Solutions, which is our government communications team. And we develop, we execute media strategies for global political campaigns to help high-profile political, business, and social leaders to successfully navigate complex geopolitical challenges. And I'm also part of the Diversity and Inclusion Council of the company. So as we try to be a little bit more diverse and inclusive in the company and in the industry. And before working for APCO Worldwide, I was the marketing and communications manager of a startup in Paris. And I also worked in EU institutions in the Western Balkans. So I kind of have this public, institutional, and private aspect to my career. So yeah, thanks again for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Very good to have you here. And then I'm going to hand over to Gina. Are you there, Gina?
I am indeed. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Brill. Well, my name's Gina. I head up the PR and activation team for Taylors of Harrogate Coffee and Yorkshire Tea. Been here about 5 years. Can honestly say that every single day over those 5 years has been different and brought with it adventures and challenges that I absolutely love. We, about a year and a half ago, decided to bring our PR team fully in-house. So we were working with an agency before then. So I was part of kind of setting up a little mini team in-house, which has been great. And before I started working for Yorkshire Tea, I started out in agencies, so worked for a couple of kind of mainly B2C agencies around Leeds and Harrogate. And then I went to work in-house in coffee. So I've been heavily caffeinated now for about 8 years and absolutely loving it.
Great, it's just what you want. Coffee and tea, the way forward. Just what I go wrong. No, thank you. And we've got, is it Johanara? Sorry, I pronounced it maybe a little bit wrong.
That's all right. Yeah, it's Johanara.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, so I'm Johanara. I am currently an associate at Golin, which is a global PR agency. I'm working in the consumer tech side of things, which is basically working with like the likes of Lego, working with Garmin, working with Collinson, which is one of the UK's biggest COVID testing companies and airports. I recently was working in different types of tech. So I've always been working with technology throughout my entire PR career. So I've started off with really heavy B2B tech in like Google and Canon, and then moving over towards like femtech, like LV and baby care, so just Owlet, and then moving over now into the more wider consumer global teams, which has been a trip. And it's definitely something I'm learning to enjoy. You never know what it's like until you start, really, and it's been an absolute amazing journey. So that's a little bit where I'm at right now.
Thank you. And just to hand over to Vicky. Hi, Vicky.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, thank you.
Good stuff. I'm Vicky Ashdown. I'm the PR officer at Chester Zoo, which is an amazing place to work if you love all things animal and conservation related. I've been there for just over a year, which has been a bit of a strange year because I was actually there for 5 weeks before lockdown started. So it was just all a bit crazy. Before that, I've been working in marketing and communications for around 8 years before that. So I've done sort of national charities, private sector, public sector. So I've had a bit of a mixture of experience there.
Thank you. And it's probably a busy week, isn't it? The zoo opened again this week, was it?
Yes, we opened on Monday. So it was a very busy day, sort of with media around everywhere. We had Sky News and Northwest Tonight and all the rest of it in. So it was great. It was really good.
Oh, excellent. That's good to see. And it's been a really good buzz this week, hasn't it, around and about with things getting open and life happening. Okay. Well, just to sort of kick off, obviously this session is about rising stars. And it obviously we just touched on it. I don't really want to talk massively about the pandemic, but it's been a very, very strange year. I think most of the attendees on this are within the university or college sector, studying PR or wanting to work into that world. I think we may have some people within schools as well, and not to mention colleges, but I think just leading on from the end of the last session, if you heard that, they were just talking about sort of standing out, making a difference, and obviously this is saying about being a star. I mean, can I come to you first, Jason? How do you stand out from the crowd in, I would say at the moment, is probably quite a difficult time, particularly when you're meeting people probably online for interviews and other things or work experience?
Yeah, it's tough. Actually, I caught the tail end of the two women there from Edelman, and I actually thought the really interesting thing that one of them was talking about was in terms of getting yourself to stand out is when she was talking about a side hustle. So a bit of background, I actually graduated from my undergraduate in 2011. I started in 2008, so I graduated in 2011 right into the teeth of the economic crisis that had kind of happened there. And so I have a lot of sympathy and a lot of empathy for people who are sort of studying now or about to graduate now into what is a pretty tough kind of market to get into anyway. And I knocked about for a couple of years. I did a couple of different things, and I had a couple of things on the side that that I think sort of helped me stand out. And one of them I think is a good example. And this isn't specifically for everybody, but I got really into poetry, and I started to run an organization that promoted poets in Northern Ireland. I'm actually an award-winning poet myself, which I just like to bring up at every possible opportunity, just to try and show off. So one of the things I learned there, I did a lot of hosting of gigs and events, and so I'm very comfortable at hosting stuff. So recently we had a big leadership conference for some of our leaders in the fire and rescue service, and part of my sort of role is in for internal comms was then to host that. And I was sort of chatting away to some of the managers about it, and you know, I sort of realized that using that kind of transferable skill, as much as that's kind of like a corporate jargony way to say it, but it really is. And if I think as well, if you I think one of the comments women made was the things that you're passionate about, you know, things that you're really excited about, are great things to try and get into that kind of that 5 to 9, you know, if outside of work hours. And I know that it's helped me sort of stand out a bit in terms of going to interviews and stuff as well. I mean, in a more kind of obvious way, I got really heavily involved in political campaigns when I was just before I started my postgrad in comms and PR, which meant that when I came out, I was, you know, I had a lot of experience of kind of political communications and stuff like that here in Northern Ireland. So I guess to summarize, I think write poetry, just do it anyway. But seriously, find like a side hustle that you're passionate about, and lean into that, you know, do that to sort of build skills that you will find will be really useful in the future.
That's a great answer. PR poet, I love that. Why don't you send your link to your poetry on the chat so we can have a look at it?
I'm not gonna look. You don't need to suffer that.
That's great. And I do really think from a personal perspective as well, it's really important. I mean, PR is such a massive industry, whether in-house or agency side, and finding that passion of something. I know when I've given talks in the past to say you can work in all sorts of sectors, people don't realise, and I think particularly, you know, their families don't realise, and particularly sometimes education institutions. I'll just continue on that question for a minute. Vicky, I know you sent me something over earlier this week. I mean, how do you sort of feel as well? How do you stand out as a star in, again, a very crowded and difficult marketplace?
Yeah, one thing I'd say is try and get experience in as many areas as you can. So one thing I did when I graduated is I interned for free a couple of places. So it might have been a couple of days here and a week or so there, but it gave me the opportunity to see what it was actually like in the working world, and actually seeing, oh, okay, they do X, Y, and Z here, but over here they do X, Y, and Z, they do something different. So it really gives you that opportunity to have that kind of inside information. So, you know, I've worked on things from events right through to social media content, filming and editing, working with designers, working on magazines, working at photo shoots, you know, all these different skill sets. And then you'll find what you're passionate about as well and what you really enjoy. So I'd say widen your experience as much as you can. And then one thing that I've tended to do as well is if you have kind of got through to that interview stage, you know, if you've been given a task, I've, you know, done that task, but then maybe added a little bit extra on. So for example, I used to work at a health and wellbeing company, and one of the tasks they set for me, my second interview, was to go away and create a communication strategy. So I did that, and then as part of my presentation, I actually executed a bit of the work as well, just to show them sort of my writing style, and that I could kind of complete the things that I was saying that I could do. So it's not only talking the talk, it's walking the walk as well. So I'd say that that's kind of helped me set myself apart in the past, definitely.
Great, yeah, and I think what you said before about there's so many different facets to PR, aren't there? And you could be doing so many different things, and finding what you really enjoy is so important. If I come on to you, Helen, obviously you sound like you've had a very interesting career, quite diverse. You've moved around from different countries. Obviously PR is a very fast-paced and busy industry, and at times it can be stressful, but I suppose many jobs can as well. How do you manage the work environment when it gets busy and demanding, and what advice would you give for anybody sort of going into that sector that suddenly is got lots to juggle and manage day to day, and kind of keep calm and level-headed?
Yeah, I think that the first thing I'd like to say is that it's not necessarily for everyone. I think it's completely fine to want something that has a different pace. There's nothing wrong with that. And certainly I think there can be differences between working in-house and working in an agency, where you have to juggle between many different clients at the same time, although in-house can be incredibly busy as well. And I think for me, what is always important is to have a clear idea of priorities and deadlines, is to have this kind of organized mindset where you always know what is due when, and never get lost in the sort of volume of work that one can have in this industry. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. That's great. Yeah, it's really good. Johannara, how would you say at the moment, obviously, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I think it's maybe for people further down the career, and they're really struggling to recruit PR people at the moment. I think there's a lot of people looking for PR people, and different agencies are in-house. They're offering lots of different packages at the moment. What would you say PR people are looking for when they're trying to get into an agency or in-house? What support can people offer? What can be given? Because obviously the sector's changed so rapidly over the last sort of 12 months.
Well, I can speak from the in-house, from the agency perspective, because in-house is something that I've always been a bit hesitant for, because with agency you have so many different clients, and I just love the variety of things I can do on a day-to-day basis. I think in terms of recruiting, it's like, do you want it from the PR side or from the people?
PR side, really. I mean, kind of, what do you think? What would you be looking for when you're looking to find an agency? And I suppose any agencies listening can sort of think about that at the moment, because there's lots of different things that are being offered, and I know it's quite a competitive time on both sides.
Totally, yeah. And when with agencies, like I said, there's so much that they can offer. It's really about finding something that, even if when you're just starting out, even if it's something you have a vague interest in and you just want to jump on it and just try something out that you might not have even thought that you wanted to do before. Like I was never like a big tech person, because like I had an iPhone and that was like the peak of my technology. And when I graduated uni, I didn't even know like PR was a thing. I was just, my friend hooked me up with an interview and I was like, oh, this is amazing, and went into it, and I just fell in love with everything to do with technology. And like Vicky was saying, like try a bunch of different things. So when you're applying and looking up agencies, it's always really important to look at the clients that they've got. What kind of work have they done? What kind of media coverage have they gotten? Go onto LinkedIn, be a bit sneaky, go onto LinkedIn, look at the people who work there, look at the kind of clients they're attached to, what kind of stuff is being posted. It's all about research. Like PR for me personally is just research and then execution. And when you're applying for an agency, it's the same thing. Research the agency, research the people you're either interviewing with or want to contact, network around that. As in, if you see someone that has an interesting job title and agency you're interested in, drop them a message, see if they're up for a chat. PR is all communication based. And if you're willing to take that step to communicate with the people in those agencies, one, it'll work in your favor because you'll be proactive. You'll be seen as someone who's willing to go that extra mile, but also it means you get to communicate and connect with people you usually not even speak to. And for me personally, I work a lot in diversity and inclusion, and I'm working with PRCA and diversity. So for me, when I'm speaking to agencies, that's one of the key things I ask them is, what's your junior diversity rates? What's your senior representation rates? What are you doing for accessibility? What did you do during Black Lives Matter when it was at its peak last summer? And how are you continuing that throughout 2021 and then the years to come? And sometimes you might not get the answer you want, and that's fine, because you're not always going to get that. So you have to sort of understand, what is it that you feel comfortable with? What do you want? Like, they're probably not in this panel, but there's a few companies I've rejected myself because I'm like, to be honest, I don't feel like I would be comfortable in that environment. Having been often the only person of color in a room, it can be very stressful and very tiring. So I'm not going to put myself in that position continuously just for the sake of my career. I'm going to choose me first. So you have to take that step to understand what is important to you, what do you want out of this, and what are your goals at the end of it, and how do you want to manifest that, essentially. That sounds so like, but it's like, how do you want to manifest that end goal, and being really open with yourself about it and with the agencies that you speak to. And I believe someone could speak for in-house, but I feel that same kind of conversation of being open in that dialogue of what you're looking for with in-house, I would assume is probably the same as well, but you just have to be ready to get the answers that you may not want. I think that would be it.
I think that's a great, and putting you first is really important. I always say, you know, in interviewing, many people say this is a two-way conversation, and obviously when jobs are maybe few and far between, it feels difficult, but obviously if you have those niggles or those doubts, something doesn't feel right, then don't do it. They could offer you a million different incentives, I think, on the package, but then at the end of the day, somewhere that doesn't offer as much could feel that it really fits you in your area. Gina, you've been nodding quite a bit on this, so do you want to pick up on this topic as well from an in-house side of things, and tea and coffee and everything else you've worked in? Obviously, what do you like to say about this?
I think from my side, it's really similar to what Jahanara was saying. It's around like the culture and like the vibe you get in an interview. That's as much as important as it is for you, the interviewee. It's a two-way thing, like you said, Lisa. So like, certainly when I was looking for a potential job, I'm looking to see whether the company kind of aligns with my values and what's important to me, as much as like what support and kind of environment there is too. So something that I'm really proud of at the business that I work for is that they look out for their people. Their people are their most important asset, and they make decisions by their people, and also the supply chain as well. So the people who grow our tea and coffee, there's a lot of reinvestment in those communities. That creates a really amazing sense of pride for everyone that works for the business, and it truly is family owned, family led. So I think just getting a sense of the culture, as well as the kind of the schemes like well-being support and flexible working opportunities. I think businesses have to move with the times now and adapt to this kind of new working culture that's sped up over the last year.
Definitely. And how did you, sort of taking me on to the next question, how did you get into PR? I know we said before, people are not fully aware of what that industry may be. So were you aware when you were at school or college?
Not really. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was at school. I kind of followed what I was good at, which was languages and theatre. Bit of a random mix, but I liked speaking French and I liked being in plays. So those are my two big things. So I decided to go and study French and Italian at university. But what I got really into, I actually tagged along with one of my friends to a meeting about the student newspaper on my first in Freshers Week. She really wanted to be a writer, and I kind of just went for a bit of moral support, and 4 years later ended up as the editor. So that ended up being my real passion point at university, was like the media and journalism and communications, and leading that team in my final year. So I left uni wanting to be a journalist. That was my goal. I loved writing, loved like communicating with people, asking questions, working with others. And actually it was a horrible time. I think I left the same time as you, Jason, 2011. Actually, it was when the phone hacking scandal was happening, the news of the world was shut, and the media world was changing massively. And I soon realised that there weren't many jobs and there wasn't much money. So I looked at what other opportunities there were to use my skills, and PR ended up coming out. So kind of thought that I felt like a journalist on the other side, so I could pitch stories knowing that they were had a bit of potential and relevance. So that's my weird old story.
Oh, that's great, thank you. Jason, I'll come back to you actually. Just again, touching on schools and education, what do you think can be done more to, I know the PRCA have been doing a lot of schools outreach work, but to really raise awareness of PR communications as an industry? Is there any sort of thoughts you have on that?
Yeah, I think it's a really tough question. It's probably far beyond my ability to properly answer, but my 5-year-old nephew the other day turned around to me and goes, "What is it you do?" And I looked at him and I went, how am I going to explain this to this 5-year-old? You know, if I turn around and say, I provide corporate strategic communications advice to a large public sector body to help them achieve their, you know, strategic objectives, he's going to look at me like I've got 3 heads. Funny, when he said it to me, part of me was thinking about this panel and stuff, and I was thinking it's almost like it's almost at that kind of, maybe it's not at that stage of the 5-year-old, but even the existence of it is something that just isn't talked about in schools very much, I don't think at all. And I don't know what everybody else's experience has been, but so come back to my thing earlier. I finished uni, knocked about, did a couple of you know, sort of different kind of jobs, different places, and I was actually traveling about, did a bit of touring in England and Ireland, and I'd sort of set myself this 3-month window where I was like, I'm going to figure out what I want to do. And it was this is 2016, so this is about 5 years ago, and I was like, it was only then, you know, I sort of did a list of all the things that I liked, all the things I was interested in. A bit like Gina, I was actually in the radio station at uni, so I was always really into that kind of stuff. And it was only going through all of that and almost doing the intense research for myself, I went, oh, okay, well, communications, that's, you know, that's where I want to work. So how do you get schools to do it better? I actually think the work of PRCA as a to make it more of a profession. Do you know what I mean? I remember a boss of mine once said to me, you know, if somebody wants their accounts done, they go to an accountant. If somebody wants legal advice, they go to a solicitor. If they want lobbying or communication advice, they come to us. We're at that. It should be seen at that level. It's a profession. You know, it's so I think definitely that kind of reinforces it and sort of and helps it. Other than that, I don't know how do you get schools to sell it to people?
It's a big subject, isn't it? One that still needs pushing a bit. Yeah, I know my mum thinks I still work in HR. Doesn't have a clue what it is, but I think educating the parents as well is one thing as well, isn't it? So more awareness of that, and teachers to talk to obviously that connection with the industry. Obviously, we're on Zoom, we're joined online here today. So the last 12 months, I mean, I never used to really go onto anything like this, and our life has all been involved in screens. I think we're going back into some sort of maybe a hybrid type world. I think people are going back into the office if they have to, or particularly in this sector, we can probably still work from home. I think many people watching on here will be starting to have interviews potentially online once they start working for agencies or in-house, maybe talking to journalists online, maybe pitching stories. I'll come to Helen. I mean, have you got any advice to give about really sort of crafting how you have relationships for interviews or with journalists through an online world?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first thing that I want to say is it's strange for everyone. We come to this, we're all in this together, and we've all had to massively change the way we work. Some of us have had complicated personal situations, whether it's family suffering from COVID or having children running around. So there's definitely a sense that the person that you might have on the other end of the line might deal with the same challenges or different challenges. And we're all in this together. It doesn't make it easy, but at least, there's this kind of sense of community that we can acknowledge when we get into a conversation. And I certainly, whether it's with colleagues or with people that I meet for the first time, I sort of try to get into a conversation or start the conversation by sort of taking a moment to sort of acknowledge that, this person might be in their living room with the dog barking, and there's no pressure associated with it. I try to sort of make it more comfortable for the person dealing with me to sort of be themselves. And certainly there is a kind of a beautiful thing that comes with it, which is that, you know, we've kind of, although we're talking to screens, somehow a certain barrier has been taken down because we sort of have these insights into people's lives and the challenges that they deal with. So that's kind of a something that can also be sort of highlighted and celebrated in a way. But when it comes to working and pitching, I think it's definitely been challenging to get journalists on the phone. So I think the sort of the craft of the email pitch has never been more important. And also trying to, again, to my point about empathy, to sort of try to remember that the stories we pitch and the moment when we pitch them is also important, because we don't work in a vacuum. We work on stories and with clients that everything is interlinked. So it's also trying to always be empathetic, but also relevant, and see our industry and our role within this industry with a sort of a bit more perspective, and maybe try to be responsible about when we pitch, how we pitch, what we pitch, and try to sort of be the best that we can be in this very difficult moment.
Yeah, I think we're all going through this together, whatever point we're at, homeschooling or whatever that may be. I know I've noticed a lot of journalists on Twitter sort of really struggling throughout the whole pandemic, who were homeschooling and turning down work as well, which is obviously, I know a lot of them are freelance as well, so that's quite difficult. I mean, Vicky, coming to that point as well with you, obviously you're from an in-house point, an in-house perspective. How have you found continuing to build relationships with the media over the last 12 months? You've probably started to see them face to face, I would imagine, more this week with things happening. But how's that been for you, and what tips would you give to anybody connecting with journalists online?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a strange time because I'd only been in the zoo for 5 weeks, and then we were all shipped off home with some computers, and then I was actually furloughed for 2 months, so I was off longer than I'd actually worked there for. So when I came back, I was kind of like, oh God, what's that person's name? What do they do? What's their number? And you kind of have to have that moment where you kind of think to yourself, okay, I've been off for a long time. I need to kind of just reset myself and get back into it in a way. But yeah, it is obviously a challenge doing things online, and you almost feel like you're cold calling sometimes, because I've not been there too long, they don't know who I am, that kind of thing. So but it's just, as Helen mentioned earlier, it's about building those relationships. It's about being yourself as well. I'm sure you all heard my mum's partner's phone ringing before. You can't help it. It just happens. It's just one of those things. You just have to roll with it. And I think when they see that, oh, actually you are human, or, I was on a video call the other day and my brother walked past in his boxers, it's not ideal. But what can you do? You just have to roll with it. And I think, if people can kind of laugh and, as you say, kind of empathize, with your situation and that kind of thing, I think people will naturally warm to you a bit more anyway, because, we are all in this strange place together. But I'd say just being human, being yourself, kind of, and just being able to laugh at the things that maybe do go wrong. I've had loads of video calls where my iPhone's fell over and you're like, oh, sorry, 1 second. And it's just, you just have to kind of go with it. But yeah, it's just about, being human, being yourself, and when you do eventually meet that person, making the effort to kind of say, oh, how funny was it the other day when whatever happened, or oh, how are you getting on with whatever project you mentioned last time we spoke. It's just about engaging with that person and genuinely being interested, I'd say.
And Gina, how do you think employers can onboard new members of the team, and new members of the team can kind of feel part of that environment, particularly when they're starting out a new role from home? Any advice to obviously people watching here that may be looking to get into a job over the next few months?
That's a really, really good question. I think trying to think, like, we've had quite a few team members who have started during COVID, and it's so strange that we've never met each other. And we were joking the other day saying that we had no idea how tall each other's were going to be when we met up in real life, because we've only ever seen this section of each other. I think it comes down to the team being as friendly and welcoming as possible. I think you do have to go the extra mile to get to know somebody on Zoom, setting up, like, we're big on relationships, so setting up like one-to-one meetings, little cups of tea in the morning, or I don't know, little check-ins on a Friday afternoon to have a drink together. I think those are so important. It's easy to get stuck into like meeting after meeting, as productive as possible, but you've got to recreate those like coffee machine chats or like corridor, bumping into each other in the corridor. And I think that takes a lot of conscious effort, I think, to get to know each other and to use that time to get to know each other as much as you can. And then I also think, like, when I think about some of the team members that we have who have joined during working from homeland, like the ones that have integrated the best are the ones that are just super curious and, you know, come to meetings with energy and questions like, you know, oh, I'm sorry, this might sound a stupid question, but what do you mean when you say FMCG, or I don't know what it might be, but just like showing a real curiosity for the company and the people there, I just think that is so important. Like, in fact, that's probably the biggest piece of advice I'd give to any PR person, is just ask good questions and genuinely listen to the response. And actually through doing that, you'll pick up nuggets about people or companies that just really help your performance and help you to build strong relationships that last.
That's a really good advice, isn't it? And I think we have missed those water cooler moments, or those chances where you can just overhear something or give somebody some advice or answer a question, or you can ask them. Joanna, coming back to what you picked up before about diversity and inclusion, you said that's a sort of an area, obviously, that you're focused on. What sort of work do you do, and what do you think sort of PR agencies, probably in particular from your perspective, need to be looking at as we move forward post-pandemic into a new world?
That needs an essay of its own, to be honest.
Oh, that's a big question, isn't it? Sorry, it's quite heavy.
Yeah.
Friday morning.
Well, in terms of what I have done, I think, keep in mind, I am still quite junior, so the things I can do and have done have been to the level as much as a junior can do, in terms of initiatives within the agencies, like I've put on events, I've had speakers come in, I've had multiple meetings where I've had to have a go at like a CEO or like an MD and explain to them where their policies might actually be discriminatory. And I think sometimes you have the policies, you have the people who create them, but the people that the policies affect, which sometimes is like myself, like I have ADHD, I'm a brown woman, I'm from a working class background, like, you know, we go on and on. So some of those policies will directly affect me. And it's people like myself that will have to be the ones to be like, actually, I'm not so sure about that. And we need to unpack that and discuss it. And PR on a whole is getting a lot better at listening to those kind of voices and trying to make the effort in sort of in changing those policies to fit the people that they're for. I think as we you know, move to this like hybrid working environment, not everyone's going to feel comfortable discussing those kind of issues. When it comes to like I'll refer to last summer, and it was like the Black Lives Matter movement was getting really big in the UK. You know, we saw a lot of black squares, we saw a lot of performative action, and we saw a lot of people talking talk. And one thing that really struck as an issue for me was that no one asked their Black colleagues how they were. No one gave them the day off. No one had the time. And that really bothered me, because if that was, things are happening for my country as well, where I would want to have the time off to understand what's happening to my family back home. And if you're seeing yourself going through this massive, you know, global turmoil, the industry needs to support the people down to down into the most basic levels. And we're getting to a point where, you know, other people need to be allies. Like I was able to organize some time off for some people purely because I was the one that was angry enough and comfortable enough to shout at someone about it. And everyone has that responsibility to protect each other when it comes to diversity and inclusion, because one person cannot benefit from the other person's oppression. Like, this is not okay. So not everyone is going to feel comfortable doing that. 100%, I get that. But that's where the conversations need to happen, is how can we empower people to talk about things that are bothering them? How can we empower people to want to support other people who don't want to say it? Because it's not on the, like with BLM, it's not on Black people to tell people that they're hurting some type of way. It's not their role to, because we can see that. we can see it very clearly that we as an industry and as a company, as a team, as a friend, need to be there for our people. And like I say, PR is making its steps there. We are doing initiatives. We are trying to work on, like I'm working on a social mobility group with PRCA's diversity network right now. I'm working neurodivergency groups. The conversations are happening. However, this is a bit controversial opinion. For me, I get a bit frustrated that we have people who have been in the industry for like 20, 30, 50, however many years, and we're still having the same conversations. And maybe as you can tell, I'm quite, I'm the person who also gets stuff done and I'm gonna get it done kind of thing. So I think the time now for PR has pivoted from these discussions to now we need to have people that are going to enforce the actions. And I personally believe it will be this new intake of juniors that are coming in. A lot of the time it's difficult to present diversity from a senior level because a lot of the time they are benefiting from it. So the responsibilities do end up falling to juniors. But I think if companies are willing to listen to their juniors and are willing to understand it's in their benefit as a company to listen to their juniors, as well as bringing people on a long-term basis, not just like a 2-minute course or whatever, bringing people in to really train people up, you know, unconscious bias, microaggressions, the lot, and bring them in and really nail down the issues that there are. That's how we're going to start to grow. And I can totally see it happening. Like I hope you guys are the ones to do it. So like,
I mean, gosh, there's a lot to be done. And I think, like you say, I think over the next, there's a lot more probably talk on that topic all day. And I don't,
sorry, I won't go on.
Great. And tell your passion. And I think having a passion, as we talked about before, is really important. Being within an agency or in-house and being able to feel comfortable to talk about that or actually challenge your peers is really important. Just moving on off that, kind of slightly different, is about sort of mental health and wellness. This month is Stress Awareness Month. We've been doing lots of events around Stress Awareness Month. Obviously, over the last 12 months, people have been really conscious about how they feel, working at home, working remotely. There's been a lot of people have been feeling very vulnerable, lots of different things. I mean, Jason, how do you sort of look after your own mental health and wellness, and what sort of tips would you give to anybody working in this sector to sort of really make sure that they put themselves number one and in day-to-day working life?
Yeah, it is a really important topic. Just really quickly, Jenna, I think that was a really fantastic contribution there. I just want to say it was really good. I think we're all kind of a bit blown away by it, and you're right, there's a lot that I think the industry probably needs to do to address diversity problems. Mental health wise, I'm lucky in that the organization I work for at the minute is quite focused on mental health, quite focused on physical health, but very much mental health as well. And there's a thing of firefighters and people in the fire service being big and tough and not needing any help and all that kind of stuff. And it's actually been a real strategic objective to knock that down and you know, get people talking about their mental health and stuff. How to deal with stress and stuff. Well, I'm having a baby in a couple of weeks, and I moved house at the start of this year, and a global pandemic's going on, so I decided just to lean into it. Apparently, I decided just to get as many stressors as possible. There's loads of practical things to do in terms of in the industry, and I think somebody touched on it earlier about priorities and setting things aside in a manageable way. What I would say, and actually if anybody listening takes away one thing that I'm saying today, especially because these are all students and graduates and stuff, is that when you do come out of uni or school or wherever it is, and you're trying to get that first job and you're trying to get your foot in the ladder, it's really, really important to be kind to yourself, because you're going to see people shoot off and have really exciting careers. You're going to see people getting opportunities that you're like, oh God, I wish I could do that. You might be one of those people, but even if you're one of those people getting all these amazing internships or careers or whatever, you're still going to be looking around you and seeing people do other things that you think are amazing too. It is a really tough time for everybody. Graduating and trying to get your foot on the ladder is a tough time anyway, because it is like there's a lot of rejection letters come through. I don't know if it's just me. I really hope it's not just me, because otherwise it'd be quite embarrassing. But you know, before you get that kind of job that you want, there's a lot of rejection, there's a lot of struggling, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And it's the kind of thing that I'll say now, right? You'll be like, yeah, okay, dead on. And if you're anything like me, you'll forget about it whenever it's happening. But it's so important to take a bit of time, just be kind to yourself, like push yourself, be competitive. Stress in of itself isn't a bad thing sometimes. We actually had this conversation recently in work, where it's actually good sometimes to be stressed when there's a lot on, there's a lot to do, because maybe being stressed is the wrong word, but it's good to be busy, and sometimes you have to deal with a lot of stuff, and that's fine. It's not manageable in the long term, and it's very dangerous in the long term. So it's not necessarily in of itself a bad thing, but it is important to remember that you're competing with yourself, and that you have to look after your mental health while you're going through all this. Because
I love that, be kind. It's so important. It's so everybody, you can be kind and say things to others and actually forget yourselves, and it really is. And that's a perfect answer. And I could chat all day, but I think we've got to wrap up, haven't we, Jason?
Sorry, I think
I realised the time. I think because we started a little bit later, and then we had some questions, and obviously there's lots more I want to ask everybody, but I think that's it, isn't it? I'm being told to shut up.
I think so, yes. Again, but everything that has been talked about today, again, you can definitely take each individual element and talk about it all day long. I think my takeaways, certainly from all of you, thank you very much. I think it proves none of you have got traditional backgrounds. You know, it proves you don't need a sticker book agency or in-house background to get into the industry. And I think my key takeaways are: be prepared for the answers you may not like, but be the change. I think that's, you know, it sounds a bit corny, but it's true. Looking after yourself and looking after what's important to you. And the one thing that's come from this year is transparency, and we are in an activism culture. You know, let's face it, that is what the world is now. It doesn't matter what that activism is. It's not got negative connotations to it. It can be positive activism, but it can be a lot of different things. And it just proves that that's the way the world is now. But all of your insight has been incredibly valuable. Thank you to each and every one of you for joining us today. Thank you to Lisa, of course, as well, for running the session. We're going to take a few minutes break. We're going to come back at 11:30. So don't go anywhere, although you can go to the loo or make a coffee. Of course, I'm not going to prevent you from doing that. But do stay tuned for the next half of the session. And we'd love to hear more of your questions and hear from all of our next round of panelists. Thank you. Right, hello everybody. That was the world's quickest break ever. Hope you got a chance to grab a drink and just take a breather. But we're going to move on now to the second half of this morning's session. And, you know, obviously just before we do, another reminder to everybody, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please use that and ask as many questions as you can. We're going to make sure we're going to allow as much time as possible for questions from the people that are speaking today. All of these people have got a lot to share with you. So make sure you encourage that and get as much out of this session as you possibly can. It's all for you guys. I know personally for me, I never had these opportunities when I was starting out in my career. I certainly never knew anything about graduate schemes or opportunities in business. You know, I was never educated on any of these things and told where to go and signposted. So this is an amazing facilitation to be done by the PRCA, and obviously to help you guys in your careers starting out in PR. So don't forget, please type in the Q&A box. Don't forget to share on social with all the handles I mentioned earlier, hashtag PRCA Careers. And you can also find everything on the @PRCA_UK Twitter handle too. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our next selection of speakers. And wonderfully, this is a section from the team at Liquid, who are one of the sponsors for today's session. So I would like to very happily introduce Jessica, Yasmin and Leah, all from Liquid, all to discuss stepping into your first agency role, what to expect, changing landscapes, integrated agencies, all that fun stuff. I'm going to hand over to you ladies. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jason, and thank you for inviting us to talk today. So we are Liquid, and for those of you who are not familiar with us, we're an integrated PR, design and marketing consultancy. I'm Jess. I'm a junior account manager at Liquid, and I've been there for 1.5 years. As you've probably heard before, no day in PR is the same. So my day-to-day seems to sort of change constantly, but mainly I'm part of the press office team, and that includes involvement in everything from sort of securing client coverage in broadcast, print, online, to helping with new business proposals, being involved in photo shoots and video shoots, compiling client annual reports, all of that stuff. But yeah, it's a very versatile sort of job role, which is really exciting, and it just means that it's constantly changing and evolving. But yes, over the next sort of half an hour, we're going to talk to you in a little bit more detail about what exactly it is that we do. But I'm just going to hand you over to Yasmin to do a little intro.
Hi, my name's Yasmin and I'm a junior content exec here at Liquid. I joined shortly after I graduated, which was almost 1.5 years ago. Similar to Jess, no 2 days are the same, and my day-to-day role is pretty much varied, but can kind of consist of writing blogs, building newsletters, website management and social media support, creating monthly content plans, as well as reporting and researching. I'm now going to hand over to Leah.
Thanks, Yasmin. Yeah, so I'm Leah and I'm a junior account executive at Liquid. I joined the team just over 6 months ago. It was at the end of September last year. So out of Jess and Yasmin and myself, I'm the newest member of the team. So just a bit of background about myself. I studied English and journalism at the University of Lincoln, and I graduated in September 2019. I was really quite lucky because I managed to get my first PR agency role pretty much straight out of university. That was at a small agency where I worked for about 10 months. And I then moved to Birmingham, where one of Liquid's offices is, and I'm now working for them as a junior account executive. I think probably one of the most important things to stress is that obviously I didn't have a PR degree and I'm now working in PR. So if you're on this session today and you're doing a degree in, I don't know, like myself, English or journalism, or even business or marketing, you still have lots of options to go into a degree in PR. So don't worry if your degree isn't specifically PR related. And just sort of day-to-day tasks as a junior account executive for me is kind of a mix between Jess and Yasmin. So I'll sometimes be writing press releases and blogs for both clients and for Liquid. I'll build media lists, which are contacts lists of journalists that we send press releases to. And I then actually send press releases to these contacts as well. And I'm sometimes doing research for companies. So no day is ever the same, as Jess said. So I'll just going to give you a quick run through of what our little session is going to involve today. First of all, I'm going to take you through what it's like stepping into your first job at a PR agency and what you can expect from this, especially at the moment in this COVID world. And Jess will then talk to you about the changing landscape of PR and sort of how it's evolved over the years to become more digital, and how agencies have had to evolve for this, and specifically what Liquid has done to adapt to these changes. And then finally, Yasmin will talk you through how agencies have become more and more integrated over the years, and how a lot of places not only have traditional PR, but also social media teams, digital teams, even digital PR, and sort of what these things involve and what you can do if you want to get involved in these things. But I'll first of all kick the session off by talking you through sort of some top tips on stepping into your first agency role. And the first thing that we're going to focus on is how you can help yourself to transition from being a student to a full-time employee. As a university student, it's not uncommon to have never had a full-time job before. I think probably many people might have part-time jobs in shops or restaurants, cafes, things like that, but not many people will have experienced the sort of traditional 9 to 5 full-time work. It's kind of a running joke amongst university students that 9 a.m. lectures and seminars are one of the worst things in the world, but in reality, this is the time that most people will start their job in the morning. I suppose at the moment, because of COVID and lots of people working from home, lots of workplaces have become more flexible. So you might even find yourself starting work earlier than 9 a.m. or you might start a little bit later and finish a bit later. But generally, sort of 9 to 5, 9 to 5:30 is something that you're going to have to get used to. So I think probably one of the best things that you can do to prepare yourself is to make sure you're as organised as possible. Your workload in a full-time job will probably be a lot more intense than it was at university, and you're going to also have people relying on you to get these jobs done, whereas at university it's pretty much, if you don't do the work, it's only you that suffers. So I think one of the best things that you can do is to make yourself a to-do list every day. Make sure that you consult this, at multiple times throughout the day, and anything that you don't get done, add it to your to-do list for the next day. And I think also something that you can do that's really useful is ask your colleagues for time management tips. Just to give you an example of something in PR, writing a press release should probably take you no more than an hour to an hour and a half. So this is something that I've learned since starting in PR, and you want to make sure that you're not spending hours and hours on something that really shouldn't take that long. Another thing that you can do to help yourself when you're transitioning from a student to work is establishing yourself a good sleeping pattern, because the student sleeping pattern is not desirable when you're working a full-time job. So I think probably the best thing that you can do is try and go to sleep and wake up at the same time every morning and every night, and get yourself into a really healthy routine so that you're getting probably, around 6 to 9 hours sleep a night, so that you're refreshed every morning, ready to go, and your brain is working at its best capacity. And then the final thing that I would probably say on this is to prioritise your work-life balance. Just before the break, we were talking about sort of prioritising your mental health and what people have been doing this month for Stress Awareness Month. Obviously, when you're stepping into your first role, you want to show your colleagues that you're giving 100% and that you're doing the best you can. But it's also so important to be able to switch off from work in the evenings, at weekends, when you've got annual leave. It's just so important to prioritize your mental health and to prevent burnout, because if you're just constantly thinking about work all the time, it's really not healthy. So if you've got activities that you enjoy, like, I don't know, obviously it's quite limited at the moment, but beer gardens with your friends, going to people's gardens, or even, regular exercise. If you enjoy going for a run after work or swimming, make sure that you're making the time to do it, because it is really, really important. So I'm just going to go on to now sort of some top tips for how you can settle into your first job whilst working remotely, because obviously at the moment, anybody starting a new job is generally doing it remotely. I did it remotely when I started at Liquid 6 months ago, and all students that are graduating at the moment are probably going to be doing the same thing. So I think one thing that you can really do to make sure that you're getting the most out of starting a job remotely is to just ask questions that you have. Never be afraid to ask questions. I know it can be really scary starting a job sort of in your spare room or in your bedroom, or, you know, even some of you might still be living at home with your parents. So not having your colleagues around you to just ask a question whenever you've got one can be really daunting. But just always pick up the phone, ring, text, email, whatever, your line manager, and just ask them what you need help with, because I can guarantee that you might feel annoying, but they won't think you're being annoying at all. They'll just see it as you being proactive, making sure you're doing your job correctly, and making sure that you're giving 100%. And I think another really important thing to do while starting your first job remotely is remembering to take breaks. Again, linking back to sort of the mental health and preventing burnout. It can be so easy to get in the zone when you're working on your own with no one around you and forget to take breaks. But it's just so important to sort of get up, even just have a walk around and stretch your legs, or make a cup of tea or get a snack, just to give your brain some time to recuperate from the work that you're doing, and to make sure that you're doing the work to the best of your ability. And I think you'll find a lot of workplaces, and Liquid especially, are doing the same thing, is that they're offering a lot of support when you're starting working from home. I've been involved in a number of sort of like social clubs since joining Liquid. We've got buddy groups where we join once a week just to have a quick chat and a cuppa. And we also have yoga and a book club that we do. So it's always that we're always thinking of new ways to keep connected, and to make sure even just little things like that are a good way to take a break from work. So I think I'll just take you through now sort of the day-to-day scope of what you can expect if you're starting a job as a junior account executive. If you're starting your first PR role, you probably will more than likely be in this role, or something like Yasmin's role, a junior content executive. So it's good to know that you know what to expect. So even if you've, like I said at the beginning, if you've not got a PR specific degree, don't be afraid to apply for PR roles. All sorts of degrees such as English, journalism, business marketing, even history. Because of the nature of PR, you're always researching, always writing. So any skills that you can take from your degree will be applicable to a job in PR. So what you can expect from kind of a junior role like mine is drafting press releases, features and blogs, building media lists, like I mentioned, and doing company and competitor research. But you might also find yourself doing admin jobs. I often do admin jobs like once a week and once a month. I'll build a report for clients on the coverage and the results that we've gained for them. I also sometimes get involved in writing social media posts. This might not be something that all junior account execs do, because you might have a specific social team that do this, but it's always good to sort of get involved in the different sections. So I'm often writing social media posts and scheduling them. We have internal and client meetings that I always get involved with to kind of build relationships with our clients. Issuing press releases is also a huge part of the job. And probably most importantly in a junior role is training. I join a lot of courses, obviously they're virtual at the minute, and a lot of webinars, but it's a really good way to make sure that you're expanding your knowledge and your skill set, which at this stage of your career is so important, because you will just find that you're constantly learning. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass you over to Jess, who's going to take you through her section.
Thank you, Leah. And yes, I'm just going to be talking you through a little bit about the changing landscapes in PR, as it's evolved so much, and it's so much more than just a traditional press office, as it now encompasses other specialisms within marketing. And this can be everything from crisis management, public affairs, social and digital campaigns, and even podcasts. So we've recently, for one of our clients, actually had a podcast channel approved, and we're going to sort of be producing a podcast, which is really, really exciting. But this is just sort of like one example of how as PRs, you always need to have your finger on the pulse. You always need to be aware of not what's happening in only your sort of like client sectors, but also just the media landscape as a whole. It is evolving, and it's a really, really exciting time to be involved in PR, because, you know, you've got things like podcasts, you've got social media, which is always changing as well. So it's just important that we go to our clients and we can always tell them about the fresh new things and what's going on, and how better we can service them, and how we can constantly be refreshing ourselves and sort of reinventing ourselves as the PRs and what we can offer them. But I've also got here just a couple of the examples of the types of activities that make up PR, because like I've mentioned, it's so much more than just a traditional press office. Press office function is really important because predominantly that's how we secure coverage for our clients, you know, on TV, radio and newspapers. However, we offer like a 360 sort of approach, and this is everything from, we recently did a cookbook, which might seem a bit unusual to some people to think that a PR agency has done a cookbook, but this was actually for our client, and this was everything from the idea of the cookbook right through getting this published and printed. So we shot all of the recipes in-house in our kitchen studio in Birmingham. Myself and a few of the members of the press office team, we even did food styling, like pre-COVID, with a top food stylist. So we learned how to really set these shots up and have it look as, you know, if you were to open Jamie Oliver cookbook, it was really that standard that we were that we were trying to get and that we did achieve. Another part of work that we get involved in is lots of photo shoots. So this is everything from lifestyle shoots right through to recipe photography, as you can see the picture on the right. And we use these photos not only for like social media and digital, but they also give us really good assets when we are talking to press and when we are securing the coverage and all those kind of things. It just gives us like another sort of string to our bow, which is really important. And again, at the bottom, we've got the website as well, which Yasmin's going to talk you through in more detail. But the main thing to note is really that even though I am mainly on the press office side, I'm regularly talking to the digital team and the social media team just to make sure that all our communications are working in harmony together. So it's really, really aligned, that we've got all the same key messaging, the same tone of voice, the same, you know, photography styling, colors, everything that's been used. It's really, really well aligned, and that's how we sort of can give our clients a full 360 service, which is really important. So as I've mentioned, PRs really need to be agile, as brief circumstances and even budget can really change last minute. Lockdown, as it has for many people, has really tested us and has really sort of pushed us out of our comfort zone and made us think creatively and on the spot, you know, just to, as we've had to adapt and change what sometimes with our clients, we try and plan as much in advance as we can, but we're also really flexible and we're aware that sometimes things change last minute. And an example of this is last year we were meant to be hosting sort of a traditional food festival. However, with lockdown and restrictions, it wasn't able to take place as a food festival once was, but we quickly were able to adapt on our plan and change this, and we actually hosted a virtual food festival. And this was back in May, when there's lots of virtual events at the moment taking place, and I think they will continue to develop and continue to take place even when, you know, we can have real events and meetings and things. But back in May, this was sort of the first time we'd done something like this. It was really exciting, and we were still able to host the food festival, but we just did it online. We hosted it through our social media channels. We had celebrity chefs in doing cooking demos, sharing top tips, getting involved. We had like live streaming so that people watching it were able to interact and ask questions, and just make it really fun and give it that same sort of energy and still deliver something for our clients that we planned to, but it was just a little bit different, and it was actually really successful. And we've actually done a few more other events like this as well since that. But I'm now just going to quickly hand you over to Yasmin, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about an integrated agency and what that means.
Thanks, Jess. As Jess just covered, in the changing landscapes, a key aspect of this is the rise of digital and social in PR. This is kind of evident by the fact that agencies are increasingly offering integrated services that cover everything from traditional PR to digital marketing. An integral part of any agency is winning those, revered new clients and attracting new business. And the ability to offer a comprehensive service that includes all aspects of campaign delivery from start to finish is something that sets agencies apart. With the designated teams for digital and social activity, the scope and variety of careers in PR is evolving. Some of the roles that we have here at Liquid within a digital and social remit include my role, which is a junior content executive. We also have a digital marketing executive, we have a digital marketing manager, social media executives, social media manager, head of digital and head of social media. With these designated teams, it also means that while everyone has their day-to-day tasks and day-to-day roles, no one is kind of pigeonholed. And I think that's one of the huge benefits of working in an agency where I think pre-COVID, everyone can kind of agree when you're in the office, you tend to learn by osmosis. And an important aspect of an agency is that all of the teams are working together collaboratively. And that kind of takes me on to my next point, which is working within digital and social teams at an agency gives you the opportunity to work on all of the varying aspects of PR, as no 2 days are the same. I think I kind of briefly touched on my day-to-day roles at the start, but just to give a bit of an outline. So in the morning, I could be working on like creating a monthly content plan. And then in the afternoon, I could be writing blogs, creating media lists, all while kind of monitoring social media and supporting in that sense. And that's just an example of the variety of work that we do and the variety of clients that we work on at an agency. Just to kind of touch on careers in PR as well, interestingly, at a team catch-up that we had today, it was noted that the digital and social team at PR now make up to 50% of the members of Liquid, which is kind of a testament to the fact that digital and social is rising and it is becoming important in its own right. By developing your skills in digital and social while working closely with the PR team, you become a well-rounded communications professional. I think Leah kind of touched on the fact that sometimes your role might sit between various teams, in that Leah is a junior account exec, but she sometimes deals with social media. Same with me, where I create media lists, and I've also had experience writing press releases and photo calls. And again, that's one of the benefits of working in an integrated agency, where you're able to kind of hone in on your strengths and you're able to kind of navigate communications as a whole and figure out what suits your skills and qualities best. Yeah. So here are a few examples of the tools that you will most likely use or at least come across when working within a role in digital and social. A lot of these tools tie in with key trends, such as optimizing engagement for content using Google Analytics and SEO, paid media for influencer marketing. As Jess mentioned with the online food festival, a lot of the work that we did caters around influencers, especially with our food ambassadors. That takes a lot of community engagement, especially via social media. And again, video-based and interactive content has also been hugely popular because of the demand of like things moving online with COVID. Some of these tools you might already know of, such as SEO, MailChimp, WordPress, and Adobe. Basic knowledge of these tools gives you the foundation to build on and gain expertise. It also makes your job easier. For example, I work across a few social clients, and so trying to navigate that can be difficult. And so software such as Hootsuite and Agora Pulse makes it a lot easier because you have it all in one place, and it's just, yeah, it's a lot more convenient. I also wanted to mention the fact that the recent PRCA Digital PR and Communications report highlights how digital PR has been thriving throughout the pandemic, as the sector is constantly adapting and evolving. It's also something that's very apparent within a lot of digital trends, where, you know, even prior to COVID, it was apparent how things were constantly evolving, things were constantly adapting to make way for the things that were coming up, such as social media, the rise of TikTok, Instagram, all of these things that contribute to the way that we communicate with our audiences. So this is why it's important to keep your ear up to the ground and stay up to date with current trends. I'm now going to hand back over to Jess.
Okay, guys, well, thank you so much for listening. I hope you found our little mini session useful. We do have a couple of minutes spare, I believe, so we'd love to take the chance to open up the board for a couple of questions. If anyone's got anything they would like to ask us, then please feel free. And in the meantime as well, you can follow us on social if you want to hear any more updates about what we're up to at Liquid.
Amazing. Thank you, Jessica, Yasmin, Leah. Everything that you said has been, do you know what I found really interesting about what you all said was the fact that it's really practical, straightforward information, you know, and actually really understanding, you know, the nuts and bolts, but making it really digestible for people to really understand what it is. You know, we can talk about day in the life, we can talk about a lot of different things anecdotally, but actually when we're talking about skills, when we're talking about ways to apply certain you know, experience that you may have had outside of working professionally, which a lot of our audiences today haven't done yet and are aspiring to do. So thank you, all of you, for contributing. I think we'll kick off with the Q&A. We've got about 4 minutes to do this, so we're going to channel this in. We're going to prioritize things here because I'm sure we could talk about this all day. I think for Leah, I think for you, correct me if I'm wrong, you got a job straight out of uni pretty much into the PR and comms space, which is fantastic, and kudos to you. It's not easy. We're in a very difficult space now, but obviously the recruitment space and getting your foot in the door is hard, as it normally is. So what's the most useful tip, would you say, from your personal journey in becoming integrated into a new role? Like from your personal perspective, how did you really get integrated and feel like you're being part of something and get involved ultimately and feel part of a team?
I think probably the main thing that you can do is just show your new colleagues that you're absolutely willing to do anything that they need help with. I mean, for example, even in my first role before I joined Liquid, I was in the same role as I am now, a junior account executive, and it was a very small agency. There was only 5 of us working there, and I had the impression that I would just be working purely on PR, sort of just writing press releases, that sort of thing. But whenever any of the other team needed help with, even with digital marketing, which I'd never had any experience in before, or writing and scheduling social posts, just absolutely throw yourself into anything you can to learn as much as you possibly can, because like Yasmin spoke about, PR is just so it's so wide reaching these days. It's not just write a press release, send it out. There's so much more that's involved. So yeah, I think if you can just, even if you say to somebody, I'm really interested in learning how to use, I don't know, Adobe or something like that, just make it known so that you could, if the opportunity arises, you can put yourself forward for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great tip, isn't it? It's about being proactive and being vocal, and not being afraid to ask those questions, and being part of a bit where we're all human beings. We're all inquisitive, and nobody knows everything. So it's about really getting involved with that and not being afraid to put your hand up. It's tricky though, isn't it? It's not everybody finds that easy. For all of you actually, in your roles, how early in your careers did you get the exposure with clients? Like, if you were to kind of think about the first time you had your first client meeting and you were first having that touch point and you were thinking, oh my God, like, what am I going to do here? I've got to be on point, how am I going to deliver? What's going to happen? Could you maybe give a bit of insight into your first experiences?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say it really varies on firstly what agency you're at. But we're quite lucky at Liquid. They're very trusting, and they kind of give you client exposure quite early on. Like, I'm not talking in your first day, but I would certainly say in your first couple of weeks, we're all sort of introduced to clients and we're given the trust and the responsibility to, be emailing clients, take part in, when I started Liquid, it was like, you could have actual meetings, and everyone from the account, right from junior to senior, would always be invited to those meetings to get involved. And it's really important that the whole team has a relationship with the client, because yes, it might be account managers or the directors that's perhaps talking to them more, but they still need to know who it is that's representing them, and who can pick up the phone, who can email them. And you've just got that really professional relationship. But if you can have a client that you can see as a friend and that you're comfortable having a coffee with, or a wine or something, that is going to stand you in such good stead and give you a relationship with a client that will hopefully last for many years. So I would say, yeah, it can be a little bit daunting, but certainly depending on the agencies, hopefully you'll get client exposure quite soon on, but you'll always be fully prepped. You'll know what to expect, and you won't be expected to give them a big presentation on your first meeting. It will be more just a relationship building, and as you progress into your role and you're more comfortable in your agency, then you'll be given more tasks. But I do think it's really important to form a relationship with a client, no matter what level you're at, from early on, I would say, definitely.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice, and I totally agree with you. And that does take time, and it does take, it's not something, again, you're not expected to know everything and do everything off the bat. And you have got colleagues around you to help you. You're not it's not like you're starting up your own business trying to work out how you're going to talk to prospective clients. These people are already embedding their trust into the business you work for. So take confidence in that. Take confidence in your own ability, but also make sure that you remember you've got people around you. Ladies, thank you very, very much. Again, Jessica, Yasmin, Leah, it's been amazing to hear from all of you from Liquid, and Liquid have been very involved with the PRCA, sponsoring the PRCA's sort of careers fair today. Thank you for joining us, and it's lovely to see you, hear from you, and yeah, indeed, feel free to stay on, but otherwise, thank you very much. So we're going to move on now to another sort of session in a slightly different context now. We've spoken to agency people, we've spoken to in-house people, we've had a lot of different contexts and experiences and priorities in sort of talking about certain subjects, but now we're going to introduce another sponsor of today's session, which is Rueben Sinclair. So thank you to Rueben Sinclair and Alexandra Lewington, who is the head of PR and communications at Rueben Sinclair. And on a personal note, hello, Alexandra. You guys have worked with the PRWeek jobs for a number of years. You've been really loyal to the brand. You've obviously advertised some fantastic opportunities with us, and of course, it's brilliant to introduce you today. So I know you've got a lot to talk about in talking about a practical guide to getting a job in PR. So this is probably something, if we have any time, I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions for you. But I'll hand over to you, and welcome, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen because I've got a couple of slides to show you guys. Yeah, like Jason said, it's my sort of session is more on the kind of practical, kind of how to go about getting a job. Hopefully, you're all here because you want a job in PR, and so that's why you're here. But I just wanted to kind of talk through some kind of practical hints and tips about the process involved about going through the kind of the job hunt more generally. So I suppose in terms of the job hunt, I guess I just wanted to run through the kind of various steps and kind of break it down a little bit for each step. So the steps of kind of going through the job hunting process, we start with kind of the research, and that's a really important part not to overlook, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But then it's about kind of getting your personal brand right and your CV right before you go on to making your applications. Then obviously it's the application process, and then it's the interview process. And so we'll go through each step, and I'll give you just some sort of hints and tips. I'll rattle through it as quickly as I possibly can, just in case there are any questions at the end, and there is quite a lot to cover off. But just starting with the research side of things then, I think the thing that I wanted to kind of highlight here is before you get started in your job hunt, I think it's really important to start doing your research on the different areas of PR, the different kind of types of PR that there are available out there. As the guys from Liquid just mentioned, the PR landscape is becoming far more integrated than ever before. So it's really a good idea before you even start applying to kind of have a bit of an idea of where you want to target your search, and try not to kind of have a bit of a blanket approach. I know it's really tempting to just apply for anything and everything within the PR realm, but actually that makes it really difficult for you to kind of prove that you're the right candidate for sort of every job. So try and target your approach as much as possible. And there's a few considerations that you could bear in mind here. So the first one is the industry sector that you want to go into. So PR can be done in pretty much any industry sector, whether that's beauty, food and drink, financial services, professional services, technology. Pretty much every industry sector needs PR in some shape or form. You might want to be a bit more of a generalist, and that's absolutely fine, or you might want to kind of really focus your search in one particular area. So have a bit of a think about the type of industry sector that you'd like to do PR within. Then think about the type of PR that you'd like to do within that industry sector. So you can do consumer PR, you can do corporate, you can do the digital side of things that the ladies at Liquid were just talking about. There's obviously the social media aspect. There's lots of different types of PR that you can get involved in. And again, you might want to sort of remain a bit of a generalist early on in your career. But if there's a particular area that you think really suits your skill sets or your interests, then it's a good idea to kind of hone in on that as much as possible. Another thing to think about is whether you want to go agency or in-house. There's no right or wrong here. There's no correct answer, but it's really important to kind of, again, try and focus your search one way or another so that you can really tailor your applications as much as possible. And then again, big companies versus small companies. There's again no right or wrong. There's pros and cons to both. But if you can kind of identify what best suits what you're kind of aiming to get from your first role within PR, then you can kind of really tailor your approaches to companies within that sort of target sector. So these are just kind of things to start thinking about before you start making your applications, and it will help you kind of tailor your applications. And rather than being kind of a jack of all trades or being trying to kind of cover all bases, you can really highlight your relevant key skills. Which brings me on to kind of personal branding, because once you've done your research and you've identified where you want to be in your career, you can then develop a personal brand around that area. Personal branding is really important because it means that you can kind of create an identity for yourself as an expert within a particular area. Importantly, particularly for you guys, it helps you stand out from competition. If you can develop this kind of personal brand around a particular area, you are going to stand out against other applicants for the same role that have perhaps gone down the kind of approach of trying to cover all bases and not actually kind of honing in on a particular sort of area or industry. It connects you with like-minded people. So for example, if you're really keen to kind of go down the route of getting into technology PR, for example, and you kind of create an identity and a personal brand around your knowledge within the tech space or your interest or passion within the tech space, it's likely to connect you with like-minded people within the tech space. And then subsequently that increases your chances of being found, which is the fourth point. So personal branding is really important wherever you possibly can. The best way for you guys as entry-level people coming into the PR industry, the best way for you guys to improve or enhance your personal brand is your kind of online presence, really, particularly in this new virtual world that we're in at the moment. So a nice little stat for you here, which is kind of terrifying, but very relevant. So 60% of employers use social networking sites to research candidates. And that's actually a relatively old study. That's a 5-year-old study. And so it's probably even more now. And that's across all industry sectors as well, not just PR and communications, where it's probably actually a lot higher, given that people would like to kind of research your online presence before going into a job like this. So it's really important that you utilize those social networking sites for good, and also make sure that they're not hindering your applications as well. So again, before you even get to applying for roles, get this part of your profile or your sort of application sorted prior to getting onto the job hunt. So just to give you some kind of tips to help your online presence, like I say, you can use social media for good, and you can also just make sure that it's not hindering your application. So the first thing is, first and foremost, check your social media privacy settings. Make sure that there's nothing coming up, whether that's on Facebook, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on LinkedIn, whatever it might be. Check that there's nothing coming up that you wouldn't want a potential employer to see. I'm sure we've all got things on our own personal social media sites that we prefer not to make public, but just make sure that those things from sort of 5 years ago aren't public, and that you've had the kind of nous to make sure that they're not shareable. Set up and use relevant social channels. So I'm not sure how many of you are on LinkedIn, but my recommendation would be, if you're not, to get onto it pretty quick. LinkedIn is a great channel to be found, and also to kind of do your own networking as well. Also Twitter, I think that actually just having a presence on Twitter and being engaged on Twitter is a really important tool to get your voice out there. So if you're not on the relevant social channels when you're job hunting, get on them and get using them. Follow and connect with inspirational leaders in your desired industry. So again, like I said earlier, if you've got a particular desire to go within, go down a sort of particular industry sector, or a particular desire to go after certain companies to work at, follow and connect with those people that work in those companies. You're likely to pick up really interesting insights. It will develop your own knowledge, but also being connected in with them might mean that they actually notice you as well. So really good idea to kind of follow those people who you're kind of looking up to. Take the opportunity to publish your own content, particularly on LinkedIn. There's a really easy way of posting kind of blog posts on LinkedIn. And these could be pieces of opinion pieces that you could publish about things that are going on in the industry. It could be just your experiences. It could be just areas that you're particularly interested in. But it's a really great way to kind of show your writing style, to show that you're being proactive, and just to kind of, again, get your thoughts out there and increase your kind of social presence. But if you're going to do that, make sure you check your spelling and grammar. There's nothing more off-putting to a PR employer than seeing an application from somebody and doing a bit of research on them and finding out that actually the content that they're putting out there isn't particularly well written or well checked. And then I guess the final thing is to say that make sure your social profile is a true reflection of you. I think having opinions and voicing those is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think just be mindful of how you're communicating your views. It's like I say, in PR, you're quite often paid to have your own opinion, and that's kind of part and parcel of what you're there to do. But I think as long as you kind of communicate it and articulate it in the right way, that's absolutely fine. But anything that is kind of aggressive or abusive or anything like that, then obviously that's a huge no-go and could really put an employer off. So use your voice, but use it in a sensible way. So if you kind of created a bit of personal brand around yourself, then I guess it's time to kind of start putting a CV together before you start making any applications. So I just thought I'd bust a couple of myths around CVs and then give a couple of tips on it. So myth number one, I hear this all the time, your CV needs to be 2 pages long, no more, no less. And actually, I don't think that's completely accurate. Whilst I think that there's a danger of overdoing it when it comes to a CV, and particularly if you're applying to entry-level roles, I definitely don't think that there should be reams and reams of pages of work experience going into detail about something that's not particularly relevant to the role that you're applying for. There's no reason that it couldn't be less than 2 pages. But what I would say is if you are going to keep it short and snappy, then make sure it's really punchy and make sure that you still get the correct information out there. I think what your CV needs to do in an ideal world is give the reader enough information that they want to interview you, but leave them wanting more so that there's still stuff to cover off in the interview. The second myth is your CV needs to include graphics and a fun layout to get noticed. Look, I think it's fine if it's a normal Word document. I don't think, whilst obviously if you're applying for a design role in particular, or a role where you're particularly needing to show your your skills on Adobe or some sort of creative software, that could be quite useful to highlight those skills. But you could do that in a portfolio, so it's not 100% necessary. I actually think that some CVs kind of go a little bit over the top on this, and they go too far the one way, trying to sort of stand out, and it makes it quite difficult to read and quite difficult to actually get the correct information. So yes, use your creativity, but just be careful to actually include the relevant information. Don't go too far one way and make it difficult to read and difficult to actually get any information off of them. And then finally, myth number 3, your work experience should be listed in chronological order with the most recent experience first. This is actually correct. It's one of the biggest bugbears as a recruiter, and I'm sure as a hiring manager, when you receive a CV and actually you're having to scroll through pages to find their most relevant recent experience. Your most recent experience should always come at the top of your work experience section, regardless of what that is. It's really important to kind of do it in a nice chronological order and give people a real insight into what you're doing right now, as opposed to what you were doing 4 years ago, which may or may not be relevant. A few other kind of top tips on the CV side of things, just that that we thought would be useful to kind of cover off. Put whatever content is most relevant first. So just in terms of headings and sections, I suppose. So absolutely still use the chronological order when doing your work experience. But if your education is most relevant to a PR job, for example, if you've done a PR marketing or creative degree, then that might be the most relevant part of your experience, so include your education first. But if actually you've done some really great PR internships or some really great PR work experience, that's probably more relevant than your education. I see quite a lot of entry-level candidates having their education first and going into loads of detail about all the modules that they've done, and whilst it's all relevant and exciting, actually it means that you're focusing very much on that as a reader, as opposed to kind of scrolling down and then seeing all their kind of really great recent internship experience. So try and put, in terms of actual sections, try and put the most relevant section first, and within the section then make it chronological. Include key achievements wherever possible. So whilst it's really useful to know what your responsibilities were in your roles and what you're actually doing on a day-to-day basis, what's even more exciting as a reader is to understand what that achieved. So it's not just what we don't want to see really is just a list of a long list of kind of what you were doing in really granular detail. What actually is more exciting and is going to make you stand out more is including key achievements. So whether that's overcoming a particularly difficult situation in whatever environment that was in, and the outcome of that, whether that's praise that you received from a boss or a client or anything like that. These kind of achievements are going to be going to make you stand out and highlight sort of various different areas that perhaps a responsibility wouldn't necessarily do. Might seem like a little bit of an obvious one, but using bullet points and headers for clarity is really important, and just in terms of layout, what's quite off-putting, I suppose, when you receive a CV is if there's paragraphs of text, which is quite daunting as a reader to kind of think that you're having to read somebody's essay, rather than clear, concise bullet points that kind of get the point across in easy and digestible format. And on that note, including kind of on the formatting sort of side of things, trying to make sure that the font and the format is consistent. I've seen CVs before where they're using different sizes all over the place and different fonts, and the formatting is just kind of a little bit all over the place. So whilst, like I said earlier, it doesn't need to be sort of a really funky graphic designed CV, it does need, if you're going to use a Word document, it needs to kind of be smart and well formatted to ensure that the reader is going to be able to digest all the relevant information properly. And then finally, just cross-check it with your LinkedIn profile and make sure that what you've put on your LinkedIn profile is consistent with your CV, because that's going to be a little bit of a red flag for employers if there's stuff on your CV that's not on your LinkedIn or vice versa. They do kind of need to match up, because otherwise it just raises questions as to whether there's just inaccuracies or actually falsehoods on either. So once you've got your personal brand kind of aligned with where you want to be in your career, and you've got your CV updated and ready to go, then it's obviously it's time to start making those applications. And with this, again, I just kind of wanted to run through a few top tips when it comes to actually physically applying for jobs. So my first one is kind of linked to my first point around research, and it's trying not to apply to just anything and everything. I know it's really tempting when you're trying to get your foot in the door to the PR industry to just apply for any kind of PR roles that are out there, but you're better off kind of really knowing exactly the type of kind of work that you want to do, tailoring your sort of personal brand and your CV to a certain extent, and the content that you're kind of producing on social media and that sort of thing, tailoring that around that kind of industry sector, and then really going after jobs within that sort of sector. The alternative is to kind of remain quite open-minded and see where it goes, and that there's not really a problem with that, but just be mindful, particularly if you're applying for sort of bigger agencies where there's perhaps multiple different divisions. It can be quite off-putting as a hiring manager or a recruiter to see somebody that's just applying for every single role going, because it just kind of makes you think, do they actually know what they want to do? Are they going to stick it out here if they're not 100% sure of what area they want to go into? So just be kind of mindful about who you're actually applying to. It sounds like an obvious one, but follow the instructions when it comes to applications. Most adverts now won't necessarily require a cover letter, but if a job application states that you need to include a cover letter, make sure you include a cover letter. If there's a deadline on it, make sure you meet the deadline. If there's screening questions that they would like you to answer in a cover email, then make sure you answer those screening questions. Just make sure you follow the instructions, because attention to detail is really important in PR, and this highlights that. Unless it's specified who you should apply to, I'd always recommend trying to apply to an individual person rather than a careers at whatever it might be email address, or a generic kind of HR email address. Applying to a specific person gives a bit of a personalized approach. You can then tailor that approach to that specific person, and you can also be certain that it's not going to get lost in the kind of generic email box. Obviously, like I said, always follow the instructions. So if it is specifically saying apply to a careers at email address or a HR email address, do follow that instruction. But if it's not specified, then try and find the person who would be most relevant to that job application, and connect with them on LinkedIn, follow up with them, and take the sort of more personal route if you possibly can. And that kind of leads me on to this point, which is trying to make it personal. Particularly in cover letters, it's a really good idea to kind of, if you are including a cover letter or even just a cover email that you're attaching your CV to, try to make it as personal as you possibly can wherever possible. So this is kind of tailoring why, for example, you might want to apply for that specific role, why you might want to apply for that particular job within that company. So just try and make it as personal as you possibly can, and like I say, also that includes kind of applying to an individual person there as well. If a company is really appeals to you and you are really keen to work for a specific company, I would always recommend applying speculatively, even if they don't have live jobs at your level available on their website. I think you'd be surprised about how many companies don't actually necessarily advertise for all of their live roles. And also, you never know when things might change. So if you apply speculatively for a company that you're really interested in today, for example, and they perhaps have an opening that comes up in a week's time, they're likely to go to their direct applicants straight away and see if there's anyone relevant before advertising for the role. So you might actually end up getting in there just before they start advertising, which gives you obviously an advantage. And then it's just about having a bit of a follow-up, so making sure you're keeping a track of who you're applying to, where the roles that you've applied for the companies that you've applied for, and then ideally kind of following up after a few days. 3 days is not a hard and fast rule, but just making sure you provide a kind of like a personalized follow-up, again, sort of reiterating your specific interest in the role. I think it just shows good enthusiasm and proactivity. And then finally, hopefully by this stage, you will have landed yourself an interview. So then it's about kind of making sure that you nail that interview. And that's probably a whole other presentation in itself, to be honest. So I'm just going to kind of quickly whiz through some quick interview tips. The first one is just to be mindful that first impressions are much more heavily influenced by non-verbal cues than verbal cues. So that means it's less about what you say, and it's more about kind of the non-verbal things, signs that you're kind of giving off, and that applies to interviews. So smile, try and look happy to be there, try not to be too nervous and let your nerves show. I know it's really difficult, but being smiley and approachable is always a good thing, and then kind of builds up a little bit of personal rapport there. Making eye contact again, in this virtual world, it's a bit difficult on video calls, but just making sure that you're kind of looking at the screen and not kind of, your eyes aren't wandering everywhere, you're concentrating, you're focusing on the screen. That's definitely a good thing to do. Check your background behind you, make sure there's nothing weird and wonderful going in the background, make sure that the lighting is all right. If you're doing Zoom interviews, this is obviously, we're all kind of doing that at the moment, but just making sure that wherever you're taking that interview, you've got good internet connection. Like I say, the lighting is good, there's nothing strange going on in the background, and that the interviewer is going to be able to see you properly. And then finally, just making sure that you're in a quiet place where you can really focus and you can really kind of concentrate on the interview that's in hand, and that you're not getting distracted by things that are going on around you. Then finally, just a few top tips again from an interview perspective. This is a really hard one, and I know it is, but try and anticipate their questions wherever possible. And the best way to do this is to go through a job description that you have got for that particular role that you're interviewing for. Think about the exact key skills that they're looking for and how you might be able to demonstrate that through previous experience, whether that's previous experience in your education, previous experience in your work, whatever it might be. Try and anticipate their questions around specific skill sets as much as possible, and have examples of where you can demonstrate that ready to go straight off the bat. Make sure you ask your own questions. There's nothing more off-putting as an employer than sitting at the end of an interview and saying, do you have any questions for us? And the candidate that you're interviewing says, no, all good, because it just kind of makes you look like you're not actually that interested. You perhaps haven't done your research. You're not really thinking hard enough about what you want to kind of know about a company before you're making any decisions. So definitely make sure you've got questions lined up. And these questions can then be used to show your research. So, for example, you can sort of, your questions can be sort of tailored to the research that you've done on that company. So, for example, sort of saying, I noticed on your blog post that you've done this campaign recently. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? What were the outcomes? And that sort of thing. So, showing that you've done your research. And then be enthusiastic. That's the final one. I think that's really important. If two people have got the exact same skill set and the exact same kind of experience, companies are more than likely going to hire the person that is most enthusiastic over somebody that doesn't look like they really want the job. And that is it. Sorry, I've done it like a whistle-stop tour. I feel like I'm completely out of breath. But I know.
I was going to say, yeah. I don't think you ever took. Did you even take a breath? I don't even know. No, I think you powered through without breathing. Amazing. Alexandra, you've covered so much, and you know what, again, like, this is the type of experience, this is the type of sort of information that we need to understand, is the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts and connecting parts of the processes. Now, we have got a lot of questions. I'm going to consolidate them. We're going to do this whistle stop, so I reckon I'm going to test
I can stay on as well and type some answers back to some of these people if we can get through.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yeah. So anybody submitted, if we don't get a chance to answer them now, Alexandra will stay on. Thank you for doing that. Appreciate that. Awesome. Right, we're going to test your elevator pitch style now. This is a really key thing, right? Elevator pitches. This is how we're going to do the responses to some of these questions. Listen, we'll go with the first question to start with, which is that, you know, if you're up against other candidates that have gone some sort of experience in PR, even if we're talking entry level, some people may have had an internship, an unpaid role for a week or something that may be seen as a priority candidate above someone who doesn't have that experience. How do you compete against that as a junior sort of PR person?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one, because I think ultimately the sad reality is that they will probably be seen as a more favourable candidate, especially depending on the kind of type of experience that you've got. But I think at entry level, most employers are looking to hire based on kind of attitude and behaviours, as opposed to necessary sort of actual experience. So I think it brings me back to kind of my point around personal branding. Like, if you have shown via your social channels and via perhaps like blog posts and content that you've been able to put out there, and the people that you follow and the networks that you're kind of sort of connected in, that you are super passionate about the industry, and you are well researched, and you're being proactive in terms of networking and that kind of thing, whilst it might not necessarily fully make up for somebody that's done 6 months worth of internship experience, it does put you in a much better position. And I think it really can highlight your, like I say, your attitude and your enthusiasm to the industry sector. And that's really going to go a long way at this kind of level. I think an employer is much more likely to hire somebody that can really genuinely show that they're excited by an opportunity and really excited by the industry sector that they're going into, as opposed to somebody that may have done a couple of internships here and there, and yes, may have a bit of insight into PR agency life, but ultimately isn't that passionate about it, or isn't that passionate about that specific opportunity.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say is a really key thing here, folks listening to this, you're not just going to have one version of a CV. I had about 15, I must have had 15 versions of a CV. You tailor, you adapt, you have to, because and that's it, and that's based on the fact that not every organization is the same. So they've got different values, they've got different positionings in the industry. You're going to have to tailor your approach, and that is the way you stand out, because you don't do a blanket approach. And one of the other questions is, sort of how do you approach a particular employer for an internship? I mean, if they're not advertising an internship, it doesn't necessarily mean they don't have one, but what's the best way on LinkedIn? But is it, what else do you think?
So yeah, I would look at try and find out as much as possible who would look after internships within the agency. There's usually a couple of people within an agency or within an organisation that might sort of be responsible for an internship program. Phone up the switchboard and ask. That's the easiest way to do it. Pick up the phone and ask who's responsible for internships, or go to the top, go to an MD and connect with them on LinkedIn and say, I'm really interested in your company for XYZ reason. Be specific about why you're particularly interested in that company, and offer your services out. And like we were sort of saying, often internships aren't necessarily advertised for, because unfortunately the reality is that lots of companies will get many people applying to them directly for things like internships or work experience or entry-level positions, and so they don't necessarily need to advertise for those level of roles. And so what they will do is they'll go to their inbox and see who, if they need an intern, they'll go to their inbox, see who's applied recently for that kind of experience, and go to that kind of pool. So it's very worth kind of being kind of quite proactive on that, and not just looking out for adverts, and just kind of contacting the companies that you want to work at, whether that's on LinkedIn, or whether that's just finding their email online, or whether that's just calling them up and saying, I'm available, how do I go about applying? That would be my advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Be bold, be brave. We're in a world where this is it now. We've got transparency. That nobody is not going to be expecting people to approach businesses and saying, look, I'm really interested in you. Could you point me in the right direction of X, Y, and Z? And also, the one thing I would say in addition to that is that businesses have been inundated with direct applications. And throughout the pandemic, and this is again another subject matter that could go on all day. But it's about standing out in your approach, isn't it? And this is what you're talking about in your own brand. I love you talking about personal brand. It's personally one of my favorite subject matters, because you are your own brand. You may be an individual, you may be a person, but you are a brand in yourself. So how do you look after that? How do you promote that? And that is really critical information. So I think we're in agreement there, and I think there's a lot more tips that we can give, but we have run out of time. So thank you.
Sorry, I
so much. No, don't apologise, because this is the stuff that people need to hear, and I think it's you've joined us to go through so much, and appreciate your time. So thank you.
No worries. I'll jump off, and I'll jump onto the Q&A and type out some messages. And if I don't get around to anyone, or if I can't work it out because I'm not very good at tech sometimes, then do email me or connect in with me on LinkedIn, and I'll do my best to help.
Amazing. We'll definitely do that to anybody listening, because Alexandra's got a lot of advice to give. Thank you again for joining us, and to Rueben Sinclair for being a co-sponsor. It's lovely to see you. Thank you. Folks, take care. Take care. We're going to take a break now, folks. Hopefully a little bit longer than the last one. That'd be nice, just to get a bit of movement, walk around, do what you need to do. We'll be back with you at 12:40 to join in the next session, and a final session for the day. Unfortunately, it's whizzed past, but do join us again and stay tuned. Thank you. Well, welcome back, everybody. 12:40 on the dot. We're going to crack on with our final session of the day. Thank you to everybody that stayed with us and joined us. Keep your questions coming through on the Q&A section in this whole session today. Please keep them coming through, and we'll answer as many as we can. But without further ado, I'd like to now introduce Lizzie Horridge, who is a senior consultant at Intelligent Conversation, who will be introducing our panelists for our final session today. Lizzie, welcome. Lovely to see you. And over now to you to host this next session. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jason. And hi to everyone. Hope you're all having a good day so far, and you've got a lot of interesting takeouts from it as well. I'm sure you have. So today I am delighted to be joined by 5 PR industry leaders. So I'll be asking them some questions about their career and any advice that they may have for you as well. But as Jason said, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat box function, and we'll get as many of them answered as possible. Because obviously, you know, we really want the session to be interactive. So we welcome our panel today. If you could all, the panel could turn on the video, that would be fabulous. So we've got 5 people. We've got Alexander, Daria, Chris, Craig and Emma. So I'm just going to go through and get everyone just to do a quick intro on themselves, tell us a bit more about who you are, where you work, your job title, and how long you've been in the industry for. So on my screen, Emma is first, so I'm going to go with Emma.
Thanks, Lizzie. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Real pleasure to be here. My name's Emma Ross. I'm the co-founder of a medium-sized PR agency called Missive. We we look after technology clients, largely B2B and corporate work. And we have a whole range of size of clients, from really small, exciting startup companies right the way through to some big blue chips like Santander and O2. So a real range and scope. And I've worked in PR for 15 years so far.
Brilliant. Okay. And have we got Alexander?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. My name's Alexander Cleland. I'm a director at Houston PR. It's a medium-sized agency, and it does corporate and financial PR for a range of clients, from small startups again to FTSE 250 clients, and across all range of sectors. My experience, I've been in the industry for 20 years. 15 years of that was in financial services and in-house, and then I've had 5 years agency experience working across different sectors. Before that, I was a journalist for 5 years, and then my first career was actually as a social worker, working as a probation officer and in mental health, which served me well working in financial services for 15 years.
Brilliant. And if we could have Chris next.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Chris Watt. I'm Senior Stakeholder Engagement Manager for the Medical Education Reform Team at Health Education England. So HEE is the national NHS workforce body, and I lead on our communications and engagement activities, essentially around improving the way that we train our doctors. I've been through a number of different roles in my career. I've not ever formally been in a kind of a PR role, but I've been in communications in one form or another for, well, basically since I left university 20 years ago, but started working actually in Parliament. And then I joined the NHS 11 years ago, and I've worked through a number of jobs in the NHS.
Brilliant. And Daria?
Hi, I'm Daria. Thanks for having me today as well. So I'm Head of Communications for Anchor Hanover. We are England's largest not-for-profit provider of housing and care for older people. I've been in-house for about 8 years. Prior to that, I was agency side, worked for sort of the big agencies, you know, H&K Strategies, Trimedia, etc. And before that, I was a journalist as well, writing for the Times and the Evening Standard. So I think about just over 15 years in the industry.
Brilliant. Okay. And last but not least, Craig.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Craig Noonan. I'm head of consumer PR at the Co-op. So I've been at the Co-op now for about 10 years. Not quite sure how that's happened. I think I've tried to leave several times, but they won't let me. I've predominantly headed up the food side of things, but the remit actually now covers all of Co-op's businesses. In terms of background, I've worked across a number of sectors: food, health, tourism, travel. And I'm about 25 years experience, but I know I don't look that old. I've worked. I was previously a journalist as well, which is kind of how I got into PR.
So I see a common trend that a lot of you were previously journalists and then moved over to PR. And what was the reason why people moved over to PR?
Pay. It was really poor. I'll be brutally honest and say it was not going to pay the way.
Yeah, that's what we're all here for, to be honest, today. Did anyone else have any other reasons why they moved, or was it similar?
I was working for Reuters, so I was writing 3 or 4 stories a day, and then every day a fresh day for news. And I wanted to do more long-term strategic work and just get under the skin of a story, of a corporate story more. So moving across to me gave me a completely different perspective on the other side of the news.
Yeah. I agree actually with Alexander on that one. I was the travel journalist. I was doing all sorts of things, and then the travel industry took a huge dip. And I was, to be honest with you, I needed to make some extra money. And actually I found that I really enjoyed the variety of work within comms. It's so much more fulfilling. Journalism is very sort of fast. You write something, it's out one day and that's it. It's the long-term strategy, campaign development, messaging, and behavioural change. Really more fulfilling, to be honest.
Brilliant, that's great, thank you. So what motivates you all to do what you do? Chris, I'm quite interested in hearing from yourself about, obviously you've probably had a challenging year with working in the NHS.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, working for the NHS, it's all about the patients for us. So Health Education England is what's known as an arm's length body. So we're kind of semi-autonomous from the government. So we do report into ministers, but we essentially set our own direction of travel and decide how we want to implement the government's policies and implement them on the ground. So our focus is always on the patient at the end of it, but we're quite an unusual NHS organisation because we're not directly patient facing. So you often hear about NHS England, for instance, in the media, and they're very directly patient facing, but we're not. We work with NHS staff. So we're about training and educating NHS staff, clinical staff in all of their roles. But what comes back for me is helping for my role working in medical, which is doctors, is giving us better doctors in the NHS, and giving us better doctors is going to give us better patient care. But how we actually make sure that the doctors know about that, and their local employers or their hospitals know about that, and the staff know about the training that the doctors are doing, and the wider NHS knows about that, is really important, making that linkage. So there's a whole kind of strategic pathway, if you like, to explaining what we're doing in maybe training changing a particular part of the doctor's training, actually how that works through into better patient care and a better NHS service. At the end of the day, that's kind of what motivates me to do a good job in terms of communicating what we're doing at HEE.
Yeah, it's really important, isn't it? And Emma, what motivates you in your job?
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly agree with Chris in terms of the impact of what you can achieve through PR and comms is really motivational. Even at a really young age, and even at an entry level, I'd say, in the industry, you get to jump straight in more often than not. And the words that you put on the page or you type into your computer can make a really big difference to the organisation or brand or person that you're representing through PR and comms, and that can feel really, really great. I mean, Chris talked about an incredibly important organisation there, and we all know the context of the last year, and hopefully you've been able to spot how PR and comms have been playing out over the last year, and just how fundamental that has been to public health and protection of our services. And I guess never before has our industry just been in everybody's face so much, and that's just what motivates me about it. It's so exciting, what we can contribute to. Yeah, I guess that's what motivates me. And I think also working with lovely, very talented people. I'm completely biased, but PR people are great. They're great and it keeps me motivated every day.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. Anyone else got anything to add about what motivates them?
I think for me, it's curiosity. It's basically about every new company I work with, I have to get to understand it. I have to understand it in depth, what it's trying to say, who it's trying to say it to. And sometimes they could be very complex. They could be technology companies, or they can be, something like private jets, which is, a completely different world. So it's the curiosity of coming in every day and not knowing exactly what's going to happen, part of it, the excitement of that, but also of getting under the skin of such a variety of companies in my present role.
Definitely. And Craig, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to build really on what everyone else has said. I think a big bit is about making a difference. I think PR is really unusual actually in a couple of ways, because I think once you start to get that senior level buy-in, and you're dealing with chief execs, and MDs on a daily basis, actually the influence you have and the ability to kind of shape the direction of a business is something that you probably don't get in very many other industries. And I think that makes it a really exciting place to be. And I think just building on the bit around kind of rewarding, I think again, our results are instant, which in many ways is great. It's also it also means it's quite pressured. But if a campaign's landed the day you stick it out, and that's great. Everybody gets a buzz when you do it, and I think that's unlike some other jobs you'll do. So I think there's a lot. It's the cut and thrust of it. I think all the bits, others have touched on, the kind of curiosity, the fact you really get under the skin of a business, and you really can make a difference every day.
Brilliant. Okay. So the students joining us today, they might be looking to apply for some jobs soon. So what impresses you when you're looking to hire new people? Are there particular qualities that you look for when you're recruiting? I'll go to Daria first.
I think showing a real interest, people who've done their research and done it well, asking good questions. When I say do your research well, I mean read around the place that you're going to interview at, and the sector, the area. So for example, I work in housing and care. Read up about it, what's going on. Don't just reel off words from the website, because that's just not what we want to see. And just use great examples. I think it's fair to say, especially at entry level, when we're recruiting, we're not looking for reams of experience. I think we understand that you're very much at the beginning of your career. I think what we want to see is that you've got the ability and the right skill set to deal with all of the different things that are going to come in your direction. So it's about showcasing that, and just really kind of being enthusiastic and willing to just do anything, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. Chris, you're nodding along. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Daria said there. For us, being a public sector organisation, we'd be looking for somebody that's not just a generic comms and PR person, but somebody that's actually got a passion for the NHS and a passion for healthcare and public service. So reading up about it, one of the big mistakes some of our applicants make, and they might be hugely qualified, but they just get the name of our organisation wrong on the interview. And it's just some of those basic things are really, really important. But showing that sort of passion, knowing the sector that you're applying for, and if you don't if in all honesty, your passion is to be in private sector PR, then, you know, don't apply for an NHS job, and vice versa as well. So show that passion for the job that you're going for, rather than just the kind of the generic thing. So a bit like Daria said there.
Yeah, great. Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add from your experience?
Completely concur with all of that. Nothing more frustrating than seeing a sort of a really generic letter that I know could have gone to 10 different organisations, and they just changed the address at the top. So I absolutely agree. To say something different, I guess in interview, help us out a bit. You know, come willing to talk about yourself. As Daria said, we don't expect you to have reams and reams of experience, but you know, we are really interested in you, who you are, the stories you've got to tell, the experience you have had, maybe working in teams in university, or you know, at school even. You know, we kind of want to hear those stories and what you've learned so far in your life journey. They're really important. They're ways that we can get to know you. It's really challenging sometimes if you're in an interview and you just get short answers in return. It gives us a much it's harder job to do to find out who you are. So I guess give us a helping hand. And then, yeah, I think confidence, Daria says confidence is really important, but a bit of humility as well. You know, that's incredibly important when you're applying for an entry level role, I think. So it's a bit...
Any role, to be fair.
Yes, actually. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Great. Okay. Alexander, would you agree, or is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to curiosity again, because I think that's an important quality, and passion. But I would completely agree with Emma, really. I'm looking for a well-rounded individual. If somebody's an entry-level position, I don't expect them to be an expert in PR, but to be an expert in their own lives. So, you know, if someone's done an English literature degree, then to be able to talk about, you know, with confidence about the books they've read, or any activities and passions they have, just so that, and I'm someone who can demonstrate curiosity about the world around them. So a knowledge of the media, but also some passion around subjects in it as well. So, I mean, for coming to us, you could be working with any kind of company. So we don't expect sector expertise, but expect someone to be able to talk with passion about something that they know well.
Yeah, of course. And Craig, anything further to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's touched on it there. Passion, you definitely want that. Yeah. I would say, you know, don't get too hung up. Experience is a funny thing, you know, when you get later on in your career, experience is judged by the jobs you've had, the roles, the seniority you've been at. But, you know, whether you're 18, you know, or 25, you've got a lot of experience to play on. It's just different. You know, the comms world's moved on massively in the last decade, you know, social media in particular. You know, so I am actually always craving having people who are kind of, you know, younger, have got a different life experiences to me, because I want to hear different viewpoints and I want different experiences. And to be honest, if somebody brings that out in an interview, that's going to put them right at the front of the queue.
Brilliant. Some great advice there. So is there anything that students could do now to like stand out from the crowd? So whether it be, you know, to start or develop a LinkedIn page, or start a blog or something like that, what would you kind of look out for? I'll go back to you, Craig, because you're still on the screen.
Short straw there. I think as everybody's touched on, you know, it is important, you know, to have a passion for the industry you're in. And I know it is hard to get that first job. You know, and I think if I look back to kind of some of the roles I had, it is about getting your foot in the door. And sometimes it's kind of, you know, back then for me, it was about just being willing to be the person who was cutting out the press cuttings and sticking them on a piece of paper and circulating them to people. But, you know, it then led to other things. And I think, you know, ultimately having a real passion for kind of news, you know, social media, and a good understanding of kind of current affairs and issues is going to give you the real grounding to probably go into a lot of different sectors within PR. Definitely, you know, if you've got something interesting to be able to write and talk about and showcase your writing skills, you know, a blog and a good social media profile are great things. And yes, LinkedIn, you know, is like the default place, you know, for people to kind of showcase who they are. But you know, that doesn't have to be the only thing you do. I want people who've got a real kind of interest and passion, to be honest, in kind of, you know, current affairs, you know, and kind of the world at large, because that's ultimately what we try and advise on, you know, in terms of businesses, whether it's, you know, the link from sourcing policies, you know, the environment, sustainability. So get a passion for something like that and make sure you just bring that out in interviews when you get to meet you know, PR leaders and you get that job opportunity.
Yeah, brilliant. Anyone else got any thoughts on that?
I've sort of gone.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Emma.
I won't be long. I was just going to add, I mean, I think Craig was covered it there, but say yes to everything. And the fact that you're here today, signed up for this, shows that you're, you know, ahead of the rest of the pack. So well done, and keep doing that. You know, there are lots of training programs, internship programs. We've just launched one recently. I think the PRCA do lots themselves. So keep your eyes out for any opportunity. Say yes. When I started my career, I'd just done a degree in publishing, and I traveled around America after I graduated, and I was sat in LA airport, and my best friend emailed me and said, "Oh, I've just joined a grad scheme of a PR agency, and we need a receptionist for 3 weeks, a temp. Do you want to take it? It's 10 quid an hour while you look for a job in publishing." And I took it, and of course ended up being hired by them, and I never went into publishing. And so it just shows you, you know, if you just say yes to any opportunity that comes your way, you just never know. So yeah, that would be my advice. And if you can, you know, try and build your network a little bit. I know it's really tricky, but there might be people in the industry willing to mentor you, and having a PR mentor, I think, would go a long way to opening some doors for you and giving you that extra edge and extra bit of experience.
Yeah, brilliant. And Chris?
Yeah, I agree entirely with all of that. The thing that I was going to suggest was develop your transferable skills. So my first formal communications role, if you like, was 10 years after I'd graduated, but I had been working in government and parliamentary relations before that, but I got all the transferable skills. So for instance, I'd managed the MP's media relations, and I'd been maintaining his website, and I'd been writing and designing his annual report, for instance. So those sorts of things were the things that got me into a formal comms role. So those sorts of transferable skills, you know, it may be something completely left field that you don't think about, but that actually you've done, and that you can actually put on your CV and talk about in your interview, that you can actually transfer into the job you're applying for. I think they're really, really, really important.
Brilliant. Okay. We've actually got some questions in from the audience, so I'll just run through them. So Lauren, hi Lauren, has asked, she was wondering if working abroad is possible or commonly done in PR, or if this is hard to do as the press landscape and culture is different. Don't know if anyone's got any experience on that.
I mean, certainly in agency networks who have offices abroad, you can do exchange schemes where you might be able to get, you know, a 6-week or 3-month exchange program in New York, for example, while someone comes from New York to London. There are agencies that do that, so you can get that experience. The media landscape is completely different, but you will learn it, and you will have people who help you learn it. So there are opportunities to do it, definitely.
Brilliant, great.
Yeah, travel and tourism, I would just say. So, you know, anyone who's probably worked in the travel industry will know you get opportunities to go abroad. Obviously a lot less the last year given COVID, and probably not as many opportunities in the immediate future. But I think certain sectors will give you those opportunities. Again, charity sector as well, you know, where they've got, you know, likes of Oxfam and others, big organisations which our international presence. Again, look at different sectors and see where there's a possibility to do some overseas work.
Brilliant. Okay. We've also got somebody who is interested in international communications. Do you think an internship with the UK government is relevant for my future career, or should I be focused on international NGOs? Also, I'm an international student and have some experience in communications in my country, but some organisations prioritise experience within the UK. What can I do to push myself to employers?
That's a big question.
Has anyone got any thoughts?
Multifaceted one. I think with the international experience, I mean, there's loads of different avenues. At the end of the day, you're at the beginning of your career. Send your CV out, apply to as many different things as possible, and push with the door open. Just from the sort of international different experience point of view. So we do have a diversity issue within our industry. Those who've noticed I've got quite an unusual name. The doors don't open necessarily as easily for people who are from different and diverse backgrounds, but it is something that the industry is looking at. So maybe it's like, using those things to your advantage. So I sit on the board of the PRCA Race Equality and Equity Board, and there are loads of networks that can help you sort of enter these more the international jobs where there's a lot of value placed on people who've got different types of experience. And also with the international stuff, when you're just not quite sure what to do, just try everything, because you just don't know. I mean, look at Emma, she did something completely different. 3 of us here were journalists before we went into career in PR. So just keep all your doors open and just bang on as many as possible, and something will eventually open and you will get through. And you just never know where your real interest lies. It can take time sometimes to find your real passion and something you want to go into. So don't maybe pigeon yourself so quickly as well. Just be open, I think, would be my advice.
I like what Daria said there about use it to your advantage. We have quite a few clients that are based internationally, and actually I'd love some experience in my team from the Indian market, for example, because we've got a huge client in India. So perhaps you could do some research as well and find out which agencies have clients based in the country where you have experience from, and speculatively inquire. You never know, that you might have a real edge actually because of it. Just a thought.
Yeah, really good answers there. Somebody else has said they graduate this year. Where would be the best place to look for entry level or graduate jobs in the industry?
I'd say LinkedIn.
Yeah. Is there any other thoughts?
Sorry.
Straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, PRWeek still, it's a place to go. Guardian Media Jobs, it's another one. Actually, though, some employers, so NHS Jobs is a really, really good place actually to find a lot of kind of comms jobs. It's got a brilliant site. I think like anything, you've kind of got to get out there and do the research yourself. So if there's something you're even, is of interest to you, have a look for it. Big organisations, a lot of police forces and the like, fire service and others will advertise their jobs, on their own sites first, and not everybody actually, goes to kind of push them nationally, but definitely LinkedIn is probably the place to start nowadays.
And try your luck as well. If you see something interesting in PRWeek, you think, oh my God, that's a great campaign, I'd love to do that. Get in touch and say, oh, fabulous work, any vacancies, what's going on? And people remember you as well, because when vacancies do come up, I mean, I've done a lot of recruiting in the last sort of 2 years, and it just feels like endless. But I've got people sort of that I know that I'm going to contact when something comes up, and you never know. It's a small industry, and I've referred people that I couldn't hire, but I've sent them on to my PR agency or various other people that I know who are looking. So network.
I'd agree. From a public sector point of view, what Craig said is absolutely right. I mean, we now advertise all of our jobs at HEE on LinkedIn, but NHS jobs if you're interested in working in the NHS. And I think there's a similar site for the education sector, for example. So yeah, LinkedIn's brilliant, but equally sectors, certainly in the public sector, do have their own discrete sites as well. So have a look at those if you're interested in a public sector job.
I was just going to add 2 more jobs boards. PR Moment have just launched theirs, and that's full at the moment. And the other one, Creative Access, is a site we've had particular success hiring from. So you might want to check those out. And they particularly support diversity, which is fabulous. As Daria said, we need it.
Brilliant. Some great answers there. Thank you. We're getting lots of questions in, which is good. So somebody else has asked, are there many opportunities for career switches or mature PR students? I don't know if anyone's got experience of that.
I think there is. I think particularly with people who've got career experience in a related discipline or in a particular area, because you can find in PR that there are specialisms where it's hard to fill a senior role, and what you want is somebody who's got career experience and extensive knowledge of that sector, for example. It may be, you know, in health, for example, in healthcare, or in tech PR, you need somebody who's very experienced in doing something related to it, and then you bring them on board. There are definitely opportunities, and the opportunities aren't necessarily at a junior level.
Brilliant.
I can think in our organisation, in HEE, in the last 6 months to a year, we've appointed people who have never been involved in the NHS or in a PR comms formal role to everything from pretty senior level managers right down to admin roles. So yeah, totally in the NHS, certainly. If you've got those transferable skills that I spoke about.
Yeah, so that just shows how important they are. Brilliant. Okay. Anyone else got any experience of that kind of thing? Fine, I'll move on to the next one. Okay. So we've got another question. If I know that I want to work, for example, in tech PR, do you think it makes a difference if I work in-house or in agency as the first job? Is it easy to switch later from in-house team to agency? Is it also quite easy to switch from a very specified part of the market to a different part of the same market? For example, from software companies to device supplier. Emma's nodding, so I'm going to go to you.
Yeah, so I spent 2 years in agency, tech agency, and then I moved in-house, 8 years in-house at O2, and then I said I'd never go back to agency, but set up my own. I think, and this is tricky to say, I think it is slightly easier to start in an agency first in this sector, so you can get a breadth of understanding of the quite diverse market. Actually, any company can call themselves a tech company these days. So the benefit of agency is you get to explore lots of different sectors and understand what works for you, and then you can go in-house. And quite often agencies, when they hire mid-level, do look for a little bit of agency experience. That said, it's certainly very possible to start a really fantastic career in-house, and if you find a great opportunity, take it. You could always move across to agency at a later date with your transferable skills. And then in terms of changing sector within tech, easy, really easy. Don't worry about, some people like to specialize. My business partner did banking and technology PR 10 years ago and started to specialize in it, and we've said, oh, you're crazy. And now, of course, fintech is where it's at. And she says to me all the time, I told you so. So she specialized, and my specialism, I guess, is telco, but other people have a really broad range of tech experience, and that works perfectly for them. So yes, you can move around.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, starting off sort of 8 years at agency, then moving 8 years in-house, and just to really echo what Emma said, but it's not just in tech. I think that experience applies across all different sectors. It's just what you get to do in agency is you get to do an awful lot in a very short amount of time. So when I started off in PR, I wasn't really sure. Yes, I was doing travel PR, and then I just realised, I did everything from finance to corporate to charity stuff, and I ended up finding that the charity and not-for-profit stuff was really where my heart was. And then I was able to sort of specialise as I went on in my career. And I just think, just having that open opportunity to try different things at agency is fabulous. And also there's more opportunity at junior level at agency. I think sometimes it's hard in-house sometimes, because smaller, fewer job roles, depending on where you work, obviously, but there tends to be. And it kind of takes a long time to get the promotions, because there's only 3 of you in a department and that's it, and nobody moves. So just take what you can and actually really utilise the agency experience.
I suppose just one build on that. I suppose, a bigger organisation, just to Daria's point, will give you more opportunities if you're starting, if it's one of your first jobs, and that's where you might get the opportunity. Once you start proving yourself, more opportunities will come along. And I mean, you can definitely flip between, agency and in-house. I think that was probably less the case, 10, 20 years ago, but I think you do see it a lot more. And actually, funnily, I think you see a lot of in-house practitioners who, later in their career tend to go into quite a senior, role within agency, where I think they're performing a slightly different role. It's more kind of, senior counsel, advisory, and they've got the kind of experience behind them. So I think it kind of depends where you're going at. So you can definitely do both, but I think I would agree with my with in-house colleagues and say that that's probably the place to start if you can, as a first job, because I think there's a lot more opportunities than you'll necessarily get in most in-house roles.
Brilliant. Okay, Alexander, did you have something to add in?
No, I was just thinking, Craig just described my career trajectory in some ways, going in-house. But I spent 15 years in financial services, and then branched out. And I think one thing to remember is that a good communicator is a good communicator. What you're developing is transferable skills, especially agency side. And if you're good at your job, you will be able to transfer it across. And we've already heard from other people on the panel so far about people from adjacent disciplines coming in. So I would say if you're good at your job and you're good at comms, full stop.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we've got another question in. Building on Daria's point about network, what would you say is the best way to connect and reach out to someone that you've never met before, virtually or in person? I'll go to you first, Daria, because it was your point.
LinkedIn, email, you can phone up. I mean, I would be email. I'll do it virtually first, to be honest, because people working in comms are always incredibly busy, and just give people the opportunity to get back to you. And then, I don't know, I think the important thing is really, to Alexander's point, we are communicators. Our entire career is based around building relationships with people. This is what we should, this is part of, just try and build these networks, say hi to people, and just be open and honest and have conversations. And I think, it's refreshing when you meet someone who is, enthusiastic, interested, genuinely done their research and is going the extra mile. That's impressive. I love that. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm desperate to, it's always great to find new people. It's quite challenging recruiting. It's really one of the things that it's reading through those CVs, meeting loads of people. It's quite hard work. You want candidates to be full of energy and show you what they can do. So if you want to reach out to people, do it. There's absolutely no harm. Build the network. You've met them, link through LinkedIn, etc., and just keep in touch, because you never know when you might meet that person again, or something else might come out of it, or you might get recommended for something.
You have a good reason, to speak to the person as well. I think we touched on before, if you've seen candidates, you want them to have done your research, do the same if you're going to reach out to someone. I would say just build on Emma's point before around, attend things. I think when the world allows and we're able to do things face to face, go to conferences, whatever's free, there are lots of PRCA events and other things which you can go to in the evenings, turn up, try and find out what agencies are doing. Often they'll have talks which are open for people. Get out there, do your research on who's going to be there, have a few things, an intro, so you're prepared, you can grab 5 minutes with somebody. Get a business card made up. I mean, nobody has them anymore. They're an unusual thing. You might just something which gets you remembered, but yeah, I think it is just a case of trying to build your network up slowly. And I think by doing, work experience internships, other things like that, I think are really useful. If you're studying currently, just make sure you're making the most of any opportunities that your education provider is kind of setting up for you. So events like this, it wouldn't be hard to probably get most of our email addresses. If there's a sector you're keen, to get involved in, and I'm not saying bombard us all with emails, but or LinkedIn, but you got to start somewhere. And I'm, I've always been in a view, people can only say no or ignore you, is the reality of it. And you will get a lot of knocks, but actually it'll make you stronger. But one of them will work, and then you'll have no regrets.
Brilliant.
Sorry, I was going to say people have connected with me on LinkedIn in advance of this panel, and I'll remember them because they've got in touch with me and said I'm thinking of getting into PR, etc. So it does get remembered, and you get in front of people, you stick in people's mind. I was thinking, if somebody rang me speculatively, just completely out of the blue, that would be really surprising and an unusual thing to do. But as a result, it would stick in my memory, as long as they had something interesting to say.
Yeah, I think now with working from home, it's very structured, isn't it? You know when somebody is going to give you a call. So yeah, I think if it's out of the blue, it would definitely stand out, wouldn't it? Great.
Nobody rings you anymore. Everybody sends an email.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's a rarity,
I love a phone call. I love a good.
Yeah.
I'm a northern lad. We love a good natter.
Brilliant. Okay, I am conscious of time. So I think just to close, if we just go through and ask everyone, what's your one piece of advice that you would give to students joining us today? So Alexander, I'm going to go to you first.
Ask questions. That's what I would say to people, is just ask questions. What people, I come back to it again and again, it's curiosity for me. I don't assume that because you're fresh talent, people aren't interested in your opinions. They are. I definitely am. I want people to challenge me and to be able to bring new ideas, innovation, fresh perspectives. And you get that by asking questions. So, do your research, ask the right questions.
Great. Okay. Chris?
I'd say don't box yourself into one career path, and in order to do that, think about transferable skills and develop those.
Yeah, great. Okay, Daria?
Agree with what everyone said, actually. I think it's about going the extra mile, but also just being resilient. It's not easy. It is a tough time out there. There's lots of redundancies, but we are seeing that there's an uplift now. People are optimistic about the industry, and just keep going, keep going. And people respect that, we all know it's not a tough industry to work in, so keep going.
Great. And Emma?
Yeah, I'll give a tip on applications directly. Read the job description and directly play back what it is the prospective employer is looking for. So all too often I see, if I ask, sometimes, we'll ask for teamwork. We highlight that teamwork is really important. If someone does that, don't write 3 paragraphs about how you sat in your home on your own and written your lovely blog. It's still relevant, put it in there, but tell me about a time you worked in a team. So directly reference exactly what they're looking for, and you will stand out from those that don't do that. And there are many that don't do that.
Okay, brilliant. And Craig?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're probably trying to communicate with lots of different audiences, and I think trying to put yourself in their shoes is important. And I think I touched on before around, no matter what your age, you have got a host of experiences which I think you can bring and which will be different to your prospective employer. So, don't be afraid to kind of shine a light on those. Your understanding of social media, its impact, when you're 12 or 13, is a really interesting and fresh perspective, for an employer, if that's a job you're going for related, to that area, to think tech industry and other things. So, just because you're young, it doesn't mean necessarily, or you've not got a job, you've not had a job in PR before. It doesn't necessarily mean you've not got something to add in terms of value to that business. And I think just touching on Terrier's point, just show perseverance. It isn't easy, but you'll get there if you firmly believe it.
Brilliant. That's been great. So thank you all for all your input today. Some great answers, I think, and some brilliant questions as well from the students. So thank you. Thank you for making it such an interactive session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.
Yeah. Good luck.
Hang in there.
Thank you, guys. It's been lovely to hear all of your opinions, your perspectives. I think it's been such a well-rounded conversation because I mean everybody's got a different angle to offer here. And look, we're at the end of the day, the people that are participating today, these are the future people of our industry. So it's really critical that we give as much insight as possible, but it's actually really practical. Like it's, what do I do if I want to approach someone? And that's a really difficult question actually, because you're almost a little bit afraid, a bit tentative. Am I going to really wind this person up by just kind of randomly speaking to them, or are people going to encourage it and welcome it? And I think we're in an always on world. People are connecting in so many different ways, and to be honest with you, it's about the genuine interest is really a really big part of this, isn't it? And I think being very careful your own personal brand as an individual and really letting that shine through, because as Craig rightly said, and many of you have touched upon, we're all individuals, we're all different, we've all got something different to offer, and we will always have a new perspective. And I think that's what builds the industry, is that that difference in the way that people's minds work. And we're not trying to look for recruiting the same people all the time. We want the difference, and we want that proactivity, and I think that's really critical. So thank you for all the messages that you've put forward, all the answers you've given to the people that have joined us today. It's lovely to see all of you, albeit virtually, but thank you for your time. And obviously we're going to wrap up there so you can go back to your busy days and clock off early for a Friday maybe. But thank you for joining us, and thank you for everybody that submitted your questions today. And that actually does wrap up today's session, and what a whirlwind tour it's been. We've gone through so many different perspectives from so many different people in the industry. We've had brilliant leaders, very much like in our last session. We've had practical recruitment advice, people from in-house, people from agency, debunking the myths and actually really getting to the nuts and bolts of how people can be involved and not be afraid to speak up and actually really go for opportunities. The world is your oyster. It's a big old world out there, but as I say, you people are the future of this industry, and it's important that you're proactive and show your passion when you are engaging in opportunities in this sector. So thank you for everybody that has joined us. Obviously, as a reminder, this session was recorded today, so you will have access to that after for your viewing pleasure. If you missed any parts, dropped in, dropped out, obviously if you did enjoy it today, then please do share any of your thoughts, your key tips. Feel free to be vocal about what you've learned today through the PRCA careers, and also through the @PRCA_UK hashtag and sort of social links as well. And obviously a huge thanks to the sponsors today, PRWeek Jobs. You're very welcome, PRCA. Thank you for having us. It's been lovely to be here. We've also got sponsors Liquid and Rueben Sinclair for giving their insights as well. It's been brilliant to have them, not just as sponsors, but as real insight providers today as well. So thank you very much. And obviously good luck to all of everybody that's been involved as well. Good luck to you. It's a hard old word out there, but don't lose hope, don't lose faith. Crack on, and you've got plenty of advice today that hopefully gives you some confidence in that. So thank you very much, take care, and have a good afternoon.